Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was a shadow monarch and fall in love with the stray devil Kuroka. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Awakening Shadow. He shadow stretched across Issei Hyodo's bedroom wall, distorted and elongated by the setting sun. He watched it from his bed, fascinated by how the darkness seemed to pulse with each passing cloud. Something about shadows had always drawn him, their ephemeral nature, how they existed between presence and absence, neither fully real nor entirely imaginary. Weird thing to fixate on, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his brown hair. Kuo Academy's male uniform lay neatly pressed on his desk chair, ready for tomorrow's classes. His third year at the formerly all-girls school had begun 3 weeks ago. And despite his reputation as one of the perverted trio, Issei harbored deeper thoughts than his peers suspected. Moments like these, quiet, contemplative, revealed the person behind the hormonal teenager facade. The buzzing of his phone interrupted his thoughts. Matsuda's name flashed on the screen. "Dude, you're never going to believe what just happened." Matsuda's voice crackled through the speaker. "Motohama got the new photo collection of Kuo's beauties. We're meeting at his place in 20 minutes. Issei glanced at his half-completed physics homework. "I can't tonight. Got to finish this assignment." "Since when do you care about homework?" Matsuda sounded genuinely confused. "Since my mom threatened to take away my computer privileges if I fail another test." It wasn't entirely a lie, though his genuine interest in astrophysics remained his private secret. "Your loss, man. These photos of Rias Grimori are. I'll catch you tomorrow," Issei interrupted, ending the call. He returned to his desk, fingers tracing equations about gravitational fields. The truth was, he'd grown increasingly uncomfortable with the perverted trio's antics. Something felt hollow about reducing the school's female students to objects of fantasy. He'd never admit this to his friends. Their friendship was real, if flawed, but the discomfort gnawed at him. The equatio ns blurred before his eyes as exhaustion set in. He'd been having strange dreams lately, dreams of endless darkness where voices whispered in languages he couldn't understand. Each morning, he woke feeling as if he'd run a marathon rather than slept. A sharp pain lanced through his left hand. Issei hissed, dropping his pencil. For a moment, he could have sworn his shadow moved independently of him. Stretching toward the fallen writing instrument, he blinked, and everything appeared normal again. "I need fresh air," he decided, grabbing his jacket. Outside, twilight painted Kuo in shades of indigo and amber. The spring evening carried the scent of cherry blossoms and the distant hum of traffic. Issei walked without direction, letting his feet carry him away from residential areas toward the old park near the abandoned church. As streetlights flickered on, a peculiar sensation crawled up his spine, the feeling of being watched. He paused, scanning the empty path behind him. Nothing but lengthening shadows and the gentle sway of trees in the evening breeze. "You seem lost," a feminine voice called out. Issei turned to find a girl about his age standing beneath a cherry tree. Her long black hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and something about her violet eyes stirred an instinctive wariness in him. "I know exactly where I am," he replied, forcing casualness into his voice. Despite the sudden tension in his muscles. She smiled, head tilting slightly. "I meant spiritually lost. You're searching for something, aren't you, Issei Hyodo?" Ice slithered down his spine. "How do you know my name? I make it my business to know interesting people." She stepped closer, her movements liquid and predatory. "My name is Yuma Amano. Would you like to go somewhere more private to talk?" Every instinct screamed danger, yet curiosity held him in place. "Talk about what exactly?" "About why you've been dreaming of darkness." Her smile widened at his shocked expression. "Oh yes, I know about the whispers in the void. I can help you understand them." Rational thought warred with intrigue. This stranger knew things she couldn't possibly know, things he'd told no one. There she was dangerous or possessed answers he desperately needed. "There's a coffee shop around the corner," he suggested, compromising between caution and curiosity. "I had somewhere more secluded in mind." She gestured toward the abandoned church looming on the hill. "Some conversations aren't meant for public places." Hard pass on the creepy church, Issei replied, taking a step back. Coffee shop or nothing. Something flickered across Yuma's face. Irritation, perhaps, before her expression smoothed into amused resignation. Very well. Lead the way. The coffee shop's warm lighting the background murmur of conversations provided false security. They sat at a corner table, steam rising from untouched cups between them. You're more cautious than I expected, Yuma remarked, studying him with unnerving intensity. And you're more suspicious than a strange girl should be, he countered. Start talking. How do you know about my dreams? They're not just dreams, Issei. They're calls. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. Something ancient has noticed you, marked you. I belong to an organization that monitors such occurrences. What organization? We call ourselves the Grigori. We study phenomena outside normal human understanding. Issei's fingers tightened around his cup. You expect me to believe you're part of some supernatural research group? That's ridiculous, she interrupted. No more ridiculous than shadows that move independently or dreams filled with voices from the void. You know something's happening to you, Issei. Something you can't explain. He remained silent, unable to deny her assertions. Meet me tomorrow night at the fountain in the Central Park, she continued. I'll bring proof of everything I've claimed. If you're not satisfied, you can walk away. And if I don't show up? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The changes happening within you won't stop just because you ignore them. They'll accelerate until they consume you. I'm offering understanding, possibly even control. After she left, Issei remained at the table, coffee cooling untouched before him. Logic insisted he should dismiss her claims as elaborate delusions. Yet something deeper recognized truth in her words. The dreams, the moving shadows, the constant feeling of something awakening inside him, all pointed to changes he couldn't explain. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother asking about his whereabouts. With a sigh, he left payment on the table and headed home, unaware of the violet eyes watching from the rooftop across the street. Target engaged, Yuma, or rather, Rainer, whispered into a small communication device. He suspects nothing. Proceed with caution, a male voice responded. If he truly carries what we believe, he's more dangerous than he appears. He's a hormonal teenager who jumped at the chance to talk to a pretty girl, she scoffed. I'll have the artifact extracted by tomorrow night. Don't underestimate potential vessels. The last one slaughtered 3 of our best before we contained him. This one's different. There's no awareness in him yet, just dreams and minor manifestations. She watched Issei's retreating form. He's innocent, unformed, perfect for our purposes. Eliminate him immediately after extraction. No witnesses, no loose ends. Understood. Rainer's wings, blah. CK is midnight and just as cold, unfurled behind her. By tomorrow, the power of the Shadow Monarch will be ours. She launched into the night sky, unaware that in the streets below, Issei's shadow momentarily stretched toward her with clawed fingers before settling back into a normal silhouette. Morning arrived with leaden skies and the promise of rain. Issei woke drenched in sweat, the remnants of his dream clinging like cobwebs. In it, a massive throne of obsidian stood atop a mountain of corpses, and a figure wearing a crown of shadows had reached toward him, mouth moving in words he couldn't hear. Issei, you'll be late. His mother's voice shattered the lingering nightmare. He dressed mechanically, mind replaying his encounter with Yuma. Her knowledge of his dreams couldn't be coincidence. Yet everything she'd said sounded impossible. Organizations studying supernatural phenomena, powers awakening inside him. It sounded like the plot of a mediocre light novel. Yet the shadow on his bedroom wall had definitely moved independently last night, stretching toward his backpack when he'd glanced away. I'm losing my mind, he muttered, grabbing his school bag. At Kuo Academy, cherry blossoms swirled across the courtyard like pale pink snowflakes. Students hurried toward the main building, conversations and laughter creating a tapestry of normalcy that felt increasingly foreign to Issei. You look like death warmed over, Motohama commented when Issei slumped into his seat. Rough night, Issei replied, not meeting his friend's eyes. He bailed on our meeting to do homework, Matsuda announced, dropping into the adjacent desk. Can you believe that? Actually, Issei's response died as an unexplainable chill swept through the classroom. Near the doorway stood Kaneko Tuju, a first-year student with white hair and an expressionless face. Her golden eyes surveyed the room before locking onto Issei with unexpected intensity. For a heartbeat, Hisu. LD have sworn her pupils narrowed to feline slits. What's she doing in the third-year hallway? Matsuda whispered. Kaneko continued staring at Issei for several uncomfortable seconds before turning abruptly and disappearing into the corridor. Dude, did you do something to piss off the mascot? Motohama asked. Never even spoken to her, Issei answered truthfully, unsettled by the encounter. Throughout the morning classes, concentration eluded him. The equations on the blackboard blurred into meaningless symbols as his thoughts circled between Yuma's claims and the strange reaction from Kaneko. Twice, he caught his shadow rippling at the edges despite the steady fluorescent lighting. During lunch, he escaped to the rooftop, seeking solitude to process his fractured thoughts. The skyline of Kuo spread before him, gray clouds hanging low over buildings old and new. In the distance, the abandoned church stood on its hill like a sentinel. You smell wrong, a quiet voice stated behind him. Issei spun to find Kaneko standing by the rooftop door, her small frame belying the authority in her stance. Excuse me, he managed, your scent changed. She approached cautiously, lick. Someone nearing a potentially dangerous animal. Human, but with something else underneath. Something old. I have no idea what you're talking about, Issei said, backing against the safety railing. You're being watched by fallen angels. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Whatever they've told you is a lie. Ice formed in Issei's stomach. Fallen angels, like from the Bible. Instead of answering, she tossed something toward him, a small paper with an intricate crimson circle drawn on it. If you're in danger, squeeze this and say, Grimori. Help will come. Before he could question her further, she turned and walked away, leaving Issei staring at the paper circle with increasing bewilderment. The world had stopped making sense, reality fracturing around him like thin ice under too much weight. Skipping his afternoon classes, Issei wandered to the public library, seeking information about fallen angels, shadow phenomena, and organizations called Grigori. What he found alternated between religious mythology and paranormal pseudoscience. Nothing concrete, nothing that explained the increasingly strange events surrounding him. As afternoon faded into evening, he found himself standing at the Central Park fountain, the meeting place Yuma had specified. Rain had begun falling in a gentle mist, refracting the newly lit park lamps into halos of amber light. Few people braved the deteriorating weather, leaving the area eerily deserted. You came. I'm glad. Yuma emerged from behind the fountain, wearing a pink dress that seemed oddly innocent compared to the knowing look in her violet eyes. I want answers, Issei stated flatly. Real ones, not cryptic warnings or vague promises. Walk with me toward the church, she suggested. I'll explain everything. No church, he insisted, remembering Kaneko's warning about fallen angels. We talk here or not at all. Yuma's pleasant expression slipped momentarily, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. You're being difficult, Issei. I'm trying to help you. Are you really? Or are you a fallen angel trying to use me for something? The change was instant and terrifying. Yuma's eyes hardened to amethyst ice, her smile transforming into a sneer. Who have you been talking to? The devils. The church. So it's true. Issei took a step back, fingers closing around the paper circle in his pocket. You're not human. Neither are you. Not entirely, not anymore. She gestured dismissively. The difference is, I understand what's happening to you. I can help control it. By taking me to an abandoned church. Thanks, but I've seen enough horror movies to know that's a terrible idea. You think this is a joke? Rainer's voice dropped to a dangerous register. What's growing inside you could destroy this entire town if left unchecked. The dreams are just the beginning. Despite his fear, curiosity surfaced. What exactly do you think is happening to me? You've been chosen as a vessel, she explained, circling him slowly. A dormant power has recognized something in you, compatibility, potential, or perhaps just proximity at the right moment. It's awakening, integrating with your essence. A power. What power? One that commands the boundary between life and death. Rainer stopped directly before him. The ancient Koreans called it the Shish. Ado Monarch. a being that ruled over the shadows and could raise the dead to serve him. The description resonated with his dreams: the obsidian throne, the mountain of corpses, the crowned figure. You're saying I'm possessed, not possessed, chosen. There's a difference. Her expression softened into something almost sympathetic. The process has barely begun. I can help extract the power before it fully bonds with you. Before it changes you into something no longer human. Doubt warred with desperate hope for a rational explanation. And I'm supposed to trust you? Someone who lied about her identity. Would you have believed me if I'd introduced myself as Rainer, fallen angel of the Grigori? If I'd explained that supernatural factions have been waging silent wars around humans for millennia? She shook her head. Sometimes deception is necessary for understanding. Rain fell more heavily now, plastering Issei's hair to his forehead and running in rivulets down his neck. Each drop felt like ice against his increasingly feverish skin. If what you're saying is true, he reasoned, why would you help me? What does your organization gain? The power within you belongs in more experienced hands. Rainer answered. Human vessels rarely survive the complete integration. We can extract it painlessly, saving your life while securing a dangerous power. It sounded reasonable, compassionate, even. Yet something in her eyes sparked distrust. Issei remembered Kaniko's words. Whatever they've told you is a lie. I need time to process this, he hedged, taking another step back. Rainer's false sympathy vanished. There is no time, Issei Hyodo. The power is accelerating its integration. Soon, extraction will become impossible without killing you. Then I guess I'll take my chances. He turned to leave. You don't walk away from me. Rainer's voice distorted with anger. The sound of tearing fabric made Issei look back, and freeze in horror. Black wings, gloss, white as oil and spanning at least 12 feet, had erupted from Rainer's back. Her appearance shifted, mature beauty replacing the schoolgirl facade as her pink dress transformed into leather straps that barely covered strategic areas. I tried being nice, she snarled, violet light coalescing in her palm. But if you won't cooperate, I'll take the power from your corpse. The spear of light materialized fully. Humming with lethal energy, Issei barely managed to dive aside as it sailed past him, exploding against the fountain in a shower of concrete and water. Pain lanced through his side where the spear had grazed him, burning like acid against his skin. Run all you want, Rainer laughed, forming another light spear. It just makes the hunt more entertaining. Issei scrambled to his feet and sprinted toward the trees, mind reeling with impossible reality. Fallen angels existed. They could create weapons of light. And one was trying to kill him for a power he didn't understand or control. The paper circle. He pulled it from his pocket while ducking behind a massive oak. Grimoire, he whispered desperately, squeezing the paper. Nothing happened. Really? That's your plan? Raw. Einar's mocking voice came from directly above. A devil's summoning circle. How disappointing. The second light spear impaled his left shoulder, pinning him to the tree trunk. Issei screamed as whole. Why energy burned through flesh and muscle, the pain unlike anything he'd experienced. I should thank you for making this so easy. Rainer descended gracefully, forming a third spear. Most vessels require elaborate rituals for extraction. You've accelerated your own demise by drawing on the power unconsciously. I haven't. Issei gasped through waves of agony, drawn on anything. Those moving shadows, the dreams, classic manifestations of awakening. She aimed the spear at his heart. Once you're dead, the power will seek a new vessel. We'll simply contain it instead. The light spear flew toward his chest. In that millisecond of certainty, of death approaching at the speed of thought, something broke inside Issei. Not his courage or his will to live, but a barrier he hadn't known existed. Darkness erupted from his body in a concussive wave, consuming the light spear and throwing Rainer backward through the air. The holy weapon impaling his shoulder disintegrated into particles, and the wound began knitting closed with tendrils of shadow. Impossible. Rainer steadied herself mid-air, eyes wide with shock. The integration can't be this advanced already. Issei stared at his hands as darkness swirled around them like living smoke. The pain had vanished, replaced by cold certainty and ancient knowledge unfurling in his mind. Arise. Asterisk. The word formed in his thoughts, carrying weight beyond its simple syllables. Instinctively, he pressed his palm against the ground. Shadows spread outward like ink through water, coalescing into a humanoid figure that rose from Earth. A soldier clad in obsidian armor, faceless helm reflecting nothing. Shadow extraction successful, the soldier's voice rasped, hollow yet distinct. Shadow Monarch authority recognized. Awaiting commands. Kill me, Raynor whispered, genuine fear replacing arrogance. You actually managed to extract a shadow soldier. What are you? The knowledge felt simultaneously foreign and intrinsic, as if Issei had always known yet only now remembered. I am the vessel of the Shadow Monarch, he answered, his voice overlaid with another, deeper tone. And you attempted to murder me. The extraction failed, she realized aloud. The power has already chosen you irrevocably. It would seem so. Issei felt strangely calm despite the impossibility unfolding around him. Now, explain why. I shouldn't let my new friend tear you apart. The shadow soldier stepped forward, a black sword materializing in its grasp. Raynor launched upward, wings beating frantically. This isn't over, Shadow Monarch. She called down. The Grigori won't allow such power to remain unchecked in human hands. She vanished into the storm clouds, leaving Issei alone with his shadow soldier and the dawning comprehension of how irrevocably his life had changed. Soldier, return, he commanded instinctively. The figure dissolved into particles that flowed back into Issei's shadow, which once again appeared normal, if considerably darker than before. Rain continued falling, washing away traces of the confrontation. Issei touched his shoulder where the light spear had impaled him minutes earlier. The skin was smooth, unbroken. Only the hole in his jacket and the bloodstains on his shirt remained as evidence. He needed answers. Real ones, not Raynor's manipulative half-truths. More importantly, he needed to understand what he'd become before someone else tried to kill him for it. The summoning circle remained clutched in his hand, soggy but intact. Kaneko had given it to him, warning about fallen angels. She'd known something was happening to him. Grimoire, he whispered again, focusing his newly awakened awareness into the paper. This time, crimson light bloomed beneath his fingers. The circle expanded outward, forming an intricate pattern that hummed with power different from Raynor's violet energy, warmer, deeper, more substantial. From the center of the circle stepped a young woman with crimson hair cascading down her back. Rias Grimoire, third-year student and the most popular girl at Kuo Academy, regarded Issei with curious turquoise eyes. You called, Issei Hyodo. Her gaze swept over his blood-stained clothes and the lingering shadows around his feet. It seems we have much to discuss about what you've become. Rias Grimoire's living room embodied luxury without ostentation. Antique furniture arranged with careful precision, shelves lined with leather-bound books in languages Issei couldn't identify, and subtle magical wards humming just below human perception. Issei sat rigid on a Victorian settee, hyper-aware of the four other people, or rather, devils, watching him with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. The fallen angel called you the Shadow Monarch's vessel, Rias stated, placing a steaming teacup before him. What exactly does that mean? I don't know, Issei answered honestly. Until tonight, I thought all this supernatural stuff was fiction. Now I've been attacked by a fallen angel, discovered I can create shadow soldiers, and I'm drinking tea with devils. It's been a rough evening. A young man with blonde hair, Kiba Yuto, Issei recognized from school, smiled sympathetically. The supernatural world does take adjustment. May I? Asked a petite girl with long black hair. Akano Himahima, Kuo Academy's second most popular student, gestured toward Issei's shoulder. He nodded hesitantly. Her fingers traced where the wound had been, a subtle current of energy flowing from her touch. Fascinating, she murmured. The damage has been completely repaired at the cellular level. Not healed, restored, as if the injury never occurred. Kaneko, sitting silently in the corner, continued watching Issei with that unnervingly direct gaze. His scent has stabilized. Less human, more, something else. Perhaps you should start from the beginning, suggested Rias, leaning forward with genuine interest. When did you first notice changes? Issei described the dreams, the moving shadows, meeting Yuma, and her revelations about the Grigori and fallen angels. As he spoke, the events clarified in his mind, connections forming between seemingly disconnected occurrences. The Grigori are indeed real, Rias confirmed. They're an organization of fallen angels dedicated to researching sacred gears and other supernatural phenomena. Sacred gears, divine artifacts created by the biblical God and implanted in humans, Hiba explained. They grant special abilities to their wielders. The Grigori initially assumed you possessed one. But I don't. No, Rias shook her head. What you carry is something altogether different. The Shadow Monarch isn't mentioned in any devil or angel texts I've studied. Raynor said it was Korean in origin. Issei offered. Korean mythology speaks of rulers who commanded elemental domains, Akeno interjected. But those accounts are considered allegorical rather than historical by most supernatural scholars. Quote, "Tell us about the Shadow Soldier," Rias prompted. Issei described the extraction process, how instinctive it had felt, the soldier's appearance, and its dissolution back into his shadow. "Could you demonstrate?" Rias asked. Hesitantly, Issei extended his hand. The knowledge remained accessible, like muscle memory for a skill he'd practiced for years rather than discovered minutes ago. Shadows gathered around his fingertips, then pooled on the floor before rising into the same armored figure from the park. The devils tensed collectively, power gathering around them. Hiba's hand moved to a sword that hadn't been visible moments before. Akeno's fingers crackled with electricity. Even Kaneko shifted her weight, small fists clenching. Shadow extraction successful, the soldier intoned. "Awaiting commands, my liege." "Stand down," Issei instructed. "These are allies." The soldier knelt immediately, head bowed in perfect submission. "What are you exactly?" Rias addressed the shadow directly. "This unit is a shadow extraction of human designation Alvaro Montoya, Spanish conquistador, deceased 1542 CE. Combat specialization, swordsmanship, magical resistance, minimal, physical strength, above average human baseline." Issei stared at the soldier in shock. "You were a real person. This unit retains memories and skills of its human origin. This unit is not that human, but a shadow construct created from his remaining imprint in the veil between life and death." "Necromancy," Akeno whispered, though without the revulsion Issei expected. "But not traditional soul binding. Something more elegant." "How many soldiers can you extract?" Rias asked Issei. "I don't know. This is the only one I've tried." "And how did you know how to extract him specifically?" Issei frowned. "I didn't choose. I just called, and he answered." The shadow soldier appeared near an ancient cemetery, Kaneko observed quietly. The park was built over consecrated ground 2 centuries ago. Understanding dawned in Rias's eyes. "You summoned the strongest nearby shadow imprint. If that's the case, your ability has geographical limitations but potentially unlimited variety. Would someone please explain what's happening to me?" Issei interrupted, frustration overcoming politeness. "Am I still human? Am I possessed? Is this power going to kill me like Raynor claimed?" Rias's expression softened. "I don't have all the answers you seek, Issei. This power system falls outside the 3 biblical factions' knowledge base. What I can tell you is that you're in danger. Not just from fallen angels, but potentially from angels, devils, and other supernatural entities who will either fear your power or covet it." "Great," Issei muttered. "So everyone wants to kill me or use me." "Not everyone," Rias corrected. "I'm offering you protection." "In exchange for what?" Suspicion colored Issei's tone. After Raynor's deception, blind trust seemed foolish. "Information, primarily. Your power represents an unknown variable in the supernatural world. Understanding it benefits everyone." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "And perhaps, when necessary, alliance against common enemies." "You want me to fight for you?" "With us," Hiba corrected. "There's a difference." Issei studied each devil's face, searching for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. Rias appeared genuinely curious rather than calculating. Akeno's interest seemed academic. Hiba projected straightforward honesty. Only Kaneko remained unreadable, her golden eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. "I need time to process all this," Issei finally said. "Of course," Rias nodded. "But the fallen angels won't grant you that luxury. They've identified you as a threat and will report your existence to their superiors. More will come, better prepared than Raynor." "Then what do you suggest?" "Stay here tonight," she offered. "This building has protective wards. Tomorrow, we can discuss longer-term arrangements." The shadow soldier, still kneeling, turned its featureless helm toward Issei. My liege, this unit detects no immediate deception from these entities. However, caution is advised. All supernatural factions pursue their own interests above others. Issei blinked at the unexpected counsel. You can analyze intentions. His unit retains limited empathic sensitivity from its human origin. The red-haired devil speaks truth as she perceives it, but holds secondary motivations she has not disclosed. Rias looked genuinely surprised. Your shadow can read intentions. That's concerning. Apparently so, Issei replied, finding unexpected confidence in having an advisor literally emerged from darkness. And apparently you're not telling me everything. A faint blush colored Rias's cheeks. Politics among devils are complicated. My interest in your abilities isn't entirely academic, but my offer of protection is genuine. I appreciate the honesty. Issei turned to his shadow soldier. Return. The figure dissolved back into darkness that flowed into Issei's ordinary shadow. The room felt suddenly brighter, as if the soldier had absorbed light rather than merely blocking it. I'll stay tonight, Issei decided. But I'm not committing to anything until I understand what I've become and what it means. Fair enough. Rias stood. Akino will show you to a guest room. Try to rest. Tomorrow will bring more challenges than today. As Akino led him through hallways lined with paintings that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Issei struggled to organize his thoughts. Everything he'd believed about reality had shattered in a single evening, replaced by a world of angels, devils, and ancient powers stirring within his own body. The guest room proved unexpectedly normal. A comfortable bed with crisp linens, a desk, a reading lamp, and a window overlooking Kuo's twinkling nightscape. Akino provided a set of pajamas that fit perfectly. Raising questions Issei was too exhausted to ask. One moment, Akino said before leaving. Her fingers traced symbols in the air that briefly glowed purple before fading. A minor ward for dreamless sleep. You look like you need it. Thank you, Issei said sincerely. Alone in the unfamiliar room, Issei stared at his reflection in the window glass. He looked unchanged. Same brown hair. Same ordinary features, yet something in his eyes seemed different. Older, perhaps, or simply aware of depths previously hidden. What am I becoming? He whispered to his reflection. In response, his shadow rippled across the floor, stretching toward the bed as if urging him to rest. Strangely comforted by this manifestation of his new abilities, Issei complied, King into sheets that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. Despite Akino's ward, dreams found him, not the formless whispers of previous nights, but vivid visions of a massive battlefield where armies clashed beneath a sky split by lightning. Atop a hill overlooking the carnage stood a solitary figure in armor blacker than midnight, a crown of shadows upon his head. As the figure turned, Issei glimpsed his own face beneath the crown. Eyes glowing with power ancient and terrible. The shadow monarch rises again, whispered a voice like grave dust. Through you, I return. Through you, I will reclaim my throne. Issei jolted awake, heart hammering against his ribs. Dawn light filtered through the window, casting his shadow across the floor, a shadow too dark, too solid to be natural. Oft knock at the door preceded Kaniko's entrance. She carried a tray with breakfast and a school uniform identical to the one Issei had worn yesterday. Rias says to eat, then meet in the living room, she stated. Placing the tray on the desk. As she turned to leave, Issei called out, wait. Kaniko paused, regarding him with those unnervingly direct eyes. You knew something was happening to me before anyone else, Issei said. How? I told you. Your scent changed. She seemed to debate whether to elaborate. I'm not entirely devil. The other part of me is sensitive to certain energies. What other part? Nekomata. At his blank look, she added, cat yukai. Japanese spirit creatures. That explains the cat-like staring, Issei mused. Something almost like humor flashed across Kaniko's normally expressionless face. You smell like the space between stars now. Empty but not empty. It's distinctive. She left before he could question her further, the door closing silently behind her. Issei ate mechanically, mind processing his dream and Kaniko's cryptic description. The space between stars, vast darkness punctuated by distant light. An apt metaphor for what he'd mpsed in his vision. power unfathomable yet contained within human form. In the living room, Rias and her peerage waited with varying expressions of anticipation. A map of Kuo lay spread across the coffee table, certain areas marked with crimson circles. "Good morning," Rias greeted. "I hope you rested well despite the circumstances." "I had another dream," Issei admitted. "More vivid than before. I saw myself as the Shadow Monarch, watching a battle, and I heard a voice saying it would reclaim its throne through me." Rias and Akino exchanged significant glances. "That confirms our theory," Akino said. "You're not merely wielding the Shadow Monarch's power, you're becoming the new Shadow Monarch." "I don't want to become anything," Issei protested. "I just want my normal life back." "That's no longer possible," Rias said gently. "The power has chosen you. Fighting it will only cause greater instability and danger, both to yourself and others." "Then what do I do?" "Learn to control it." Kiba leaned forward earnestly. "Master the abilities before they master you." "How?" "There's no instruction manual for becoming the Lord of Shadows. Actually." Rias retrieved an ancient book bound in what appeared to be black dragonhide. "There might be. This text mentions rulers of elemental domains in pre-biblical times. The Shadow Monarch appears briefly, described as a being who commanded the boundary between life and death, raising armies from fallen warriors to battle other monarchs." Issei accepted the book, fingers tracing embossed symbols on its cover. "Does it explain how the power transfers? Or what happens to the human vessel?" "Unfortunately, no. Those details are frustratingly absent." Rias indicated the map. "More pressingly, we've detected fallen angel movements in these areas. They're searching for you. They won't stop, will they?" "Not until they've either captured your power or confirmed it's permanently beyond their reach." Rias's expression hardened. The Grigori leadership might be reasonable, but rogue elements like Rainer operate with their own agenda. "And devils, what's your agenda regarding my power?" Rias smiled appreciatively at his directness. "Devils collect power and abilities through various means. Traditionally, I would offer to reincarnate you as part of my peerage, binding your abilities to my household. But, your nature as the Shadow Monarch makes that impossible. The reincarnation process would likely fail or produce unpredictable results. So instead you're offering alliance without ownership." "Precisely." Rias nodded. "You maintain independence while gaining protection and knowledge. We gain an ally with unique abilities and insight into a power system previously unknown to Devilkind." It sounded reasonable, perhaps too reasonable. "And if I refuse, then we part ways amicably, though I would strongly caution against facing the supernatural world alone when you barely understand your own abilities." Issei considered his options, which seemed depressingly limited. Return home, endangering his parents and himself. Accept Rias's offer and hope her agenda aligned with his well-being. Flee Kuo entirely, becoming a drifting target for supernatural hunters. As he deliberated, a distinctive sensation crept up his spine, the feeling of shadows responding to his emotions, stretching toward the book in his hands. Acting on instinct, Issei allowed the darkness to flow from his fingers into the ancient text. The room dimmed perceptibly as shadows enveloped the book. When they receded, he text on its pages had changed. No longer the incomprehensible symbols of before, but clear Japanese characters describing abilities, limitations, and the history of the Shadow Monarch. "It recognized you," Akino breathed, leaning closer. "The book responded to your power." Issei scanned the newly revealed information. According to this, the Shadow Monarch was one of several rulers who maintained balance between elemental domains. When the biblical factions rose to prominence, the monarchs retreated into vessels, humans compatible with their essence, to survive in diminished form. "Does it explain what happens to the vessels?" Kiba asked. Issei continued reading, expression growing increasingly troubled. "The vessel gradually transforms, gaining the monarch's abilities while retaining human consciousness and will. Eventually, the transformation completes and the vessel becomes the new monarch, no longer human, but not exactly the original being either. A fusion of both. That's consistent with what we've observed," Rias noted. "Your shadow abilities are developing rapidly, yet your personality remains distinctly human." Kaneko, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, suddenly stiffened. "Someone's coming. Multiple presences, moving fast." Rias closed her eyes briefly, extending her supernatural senses. "Fallen angels. At least 4, approaching from different directions. They found us, Akeno confirmed, moving toward the window. Protective wards are holding, but they're testing for weaknesses. Issei's heart raced with mingled fear and unexpected anticipation. Something within him, the awakening monarch, perhaps, yearned for confrontation, for the opportunity to demonstrate power and dominance. We need to move, Rias decided. This building is warded, but sustained assault will eventually breach our defenses. Where? Kiba asked, a sword materializing in his hand. The old school building. The Occult Research Club room has our strongest permanent wards. Rias turned to Issei. We'll create a diversion. Can you extract shadow soldiers to defend yourself while moving to the secondary location? The question triggered intuitive knowledge. Limitations and capabilities unfurling in his mind like remembered skills. I can extract 3 soldiers currently without excessive strain. More would deplete my reserves dangerously. Good. Akeno and I will engage from the front. Kiba, Kaneko, cover the rear. Issei stays center with shadow protection. Rias's commanding presence belied her youthful appearance. Questions. Just one, Issei said. Darkness already gathering around his fingertips. What happens when we reach the school? We can't hide forever. We're not hiding, Rias corrected, crimson energy coalescing around her hands. We're choosing the battlefield. This is your first lesson in controlling your power, Issei. Always fight where your abilities have greatest advantage. The first attack came as they exited the build. Ing's rear entrance, a barrage of light spears that illuminated the pre-dawn gloom with violent violet energy. Akeno responded with lightning that split the sky, while Rias unleashed Crimson Destructio. And that obliterated the incoming projectiles. Issei pressed his palm to the ground, shadows flowing outward to form 3 distinct soldiers, the Spanish conquistador from before, joined by a massive V. King wielding a spectral axe and a lithe female archer whose features suggested Japanese ancestry. Protect and escort, Issei commanded, the words feeling ancient in his mouth. The shadow soldiers moved with supernatural coordination, forming a triangular formation around him as the group advanced toward Kuo Academy through back streets and alleys. Twice, fallen angels swooped low for attack runs, only to be repelled by coordinated defense. Kiba's blinding swordsmanship, Kaneko's inhuman strength, Akeno's lightning, Rias's destruction, and the shadow soldiers' unwavering protection. As they neared the school grounds, Issei felt his control solidifying. Each step brought greater communion with the shadows surrounding him, each commanded extraction easier than the last. The voice from his dream remained silent, yet its presence hummed beneath his thoughts, not as invader, but as mentor, guiding his awakening abilities. Almost there, Rias called back, her uniform singed but her determination undiminished. The old school building loomed ahead, its Victorian architecture incongruous against the modern main campus. As they crossed the open ground between structures, the fallen Else launched their most coordinated attack yet, 8 figures diving simultaneously from different angles, light spears forming a cage of deadly energy around the group. Scatter, Rias commanded. In the chaos that followed, Issei lost sight of the others. His shadow soldiers maintained formation, deflecting light spears with weapons and armor of living darkness. One spear penetrated their defense, striking Issei's arm with searing pain, yet even as he gasped, shadows wrapped around the wound, neutralizing the holy energy and beginning the same restoration process he'd experienced in the park. A fallen angel with silver hair and cruel features landed directly in his path, twin light daggers gleaming in his hands. The Shadow Monarch's vessel, he sneered. You don't look like much. The conquistador shadow lunged forward, obsidian sword clashing against light daggers with a sound like shattered glass. The Viking flanked, spectral axe sweeping in a deadly arc that forced the fallen angel airborne again. Instinct guided Issei's next action. Extending his hand toward the school's shadow-filled tree line, he called, "Arise and serve your monarch." Darkness rippled across the ground like a tide of ink, flowing toward him from every shadow within 50 meters. Where Raynor had created single light spears, Issei now commanded an ocean of darkness that rose in countless tendrils around him. The fallen angel's confidence faltered. Impossible. The integration can't advance this quickly. You should have left me alone, Issei replied, voice resonating with power not entirely his own. Now you face the consequences. Quote, shadow tendrils launched upward, too numerous to dodge completely. Several wrapped around the fallen angel's wings, dragging him earthward despite his desperate struggles. More shadows coalesced into chains that bound his limbs and torso, nullifying his light weapons with overwhelming darkness. Extract, Issei commanded, pressing his palm against the fallen angel's forehead. The process differed from previous extractions, more violent, more invasive, yet undeniably effective. Darkness poured into the fallen angel, filling his eyes and mouth as he screamed. When the shadows receded, they pulled a glowing essence from the body, leaving behind an empty shell that crumbled to ash. The extracted essence reformed beside Issei as a shadow soldier with wings of midnight spanning 15 feet. Unlike the other soldiers, this one's helm revealed glowing eyes filled with mingled hatred and subservience. Shadow extraction of fallen angel designation Donasik successful. The new soldier intoned, voice layered with harmonic undertones. Angelic abilities preserved, awaiting commands, my liege. A mixture of horror and fascination washed through Issei. He'd not only killed the fallen angel but transformed him into a servant, a process that felt simultaneously wrong and perfectly natural. The remaining fallen angels, witnessing their comrade's fate, retreated hastily. Wings carrying them beyond range of the shadow tendrils. Rias and her peerage regrouped around Issei, regarding his new extraction with varying expressions of shock and wariness. You extracted a fallen angel, Akino whispered, dark humor lacing her voice. How deliciously ironic. I didn't know I could do that, Issei admitted, the enormity of his action settling over him. It just happened. The Shadow Monarch's power grows within you, Rias observed, eyeing the winged shadow soldier. Faster than anticipated, they reached the Occult Research Club room without further incident. The fallen angels maintaining distance while clearly tracking their movements. Inside, ornate magical circles activated as Rias sealed the entrance, establishing layers of protection against intrusion. The club room resembled a Victorian parlor, antique furniture, velvet curtains, and occult symbols subtly incorporated into the decor. Under different circumstances, Issei might have appreciated its aesthetic. Currently, he focused on controlling the 4 shadow soldiers still manifested around him, each drawing continuously on his energy reserves. Return, he commanded. All 4 dissolved into particles that flowed back into his shadow, which had grown so dark it appeared as a void against the floorboards. Exhaustion hit immediately, Issei's legs buckling as the saint. Reign of maintaining multiple extractions caught up with him. Kiba caught his arm, guiding him to a nearby sofa. The book mentioned energy limitations, Issei explained through labored breaths. Each extraction draws from my reserves. The fallen angel extraction consumed significantly more than the others. Higher life forms require greater power, Rias nodded. That makes sense conceptually. What doesn't make sense, Akino interjected, is how quickly you're adapting to these abilities. Most supernatural powers require months or years of training for basic proficiency. Issei leaned back, closing his eyes as fatigue washed through him. It doesn't feel like learning. It feels like remembering. Like the knowledge was always there, just waiting for the right trigger. The voice in your dream, Rias mused. Perhaps the original Shadow Monarch's consciousness provides guidance. If that's true, Kiba said, then the transformation might be progressing faster than we realized. Kaneko approached Issei, studying him with renewed intensity. Your scent changed again, less human now. The observation should have terrified him. Instead, Issei felt oddly calm, as if acknowledging an inevitable tide rather than fighting against it. How long do I have before the transformation completes? That depends, Rias answered carefully, on whether you resist or embrace the process. And if I resist? Based on similar supernatural transmutations, resistance typically prolongs the process but increases instability. Dangerous power fluctuations, personality dissociation, physical strain. While embracing it accelerates completion but maintains stability, Issei concluded. Precisely. The decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. Fighting against the Shadow Monarch's power had only brought confusion and vulnerability. Understanding it, working with it rather than against it, offered protection not just for himself but for those he cared about. Then I choose to embrace it, Issei declared. But on my terms. I'm becoming the Shadow Monarch, but I remain Issei Hyodo. My will, my choices, my humanity, even if transformed. Something shifted in the atmosphere. a subtle realignment of energies that hummed through the room like distant thunder. The shadows around Issei's feet briefly formed a crown-like shape before settling back into ordinary darkness. "I believe," Rias said quietly. "The Shadow Monarch just acknowledged your declaration." Outside, dawn broke fully over Kuo town, golden light streaming through the club room's windows. Issei stood, finding his strength partially restored. Where confusion and fear had dominated his thoughts hours ago, purpose now crystallized with growing certainty. He was becoming something beyond human, something ancient and powerful. But unlike the original Shadow Monarch, he would forge his own path, define his own purpose. Not as conqueror or destroyer, but as protector of those who couldn't protect themselves. Starting with the fallen angels currently circling the school like vultures. "They'll be back," Issei stated, watching shadows coalesce around his fingertips. "With reinforcements. Then we'll be ready," Rias answered, crimson energy dancing across her palms. Together. For the first time since shadows began moving independently in his bedroom, Issei smiled with genuine confidence. He Shadow Monarch was rising again, but this time, on humanity's side. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, The Stray Cat's Curiosity. Kuroka's bare feet made no sound against the wooden beam as she balanced effortlessly 40 feet above the forest floor. Moonlight filtered through ancient pines, casting dappled patterns across her black kimono. She inhaled deeply, sorting through the night's scents, pine resin, distant water. Small creatures burrowing in undergrowth, and something else. "Something wrong. There you are," she whispered, golden eyes narrowing as she detected the anomaly she'd been tracking for 3 days. She leapt between trees with feline grace, 2 black tails materializing behind her as she abandoned the pretense of humanity. The foreign energy signature grew stronger, a void where power should be. An absence so complete it paradoxically registered as presence. The disturbance had appeared suddenly, flaring like a beacon to those sensitive to supernatural energies before settling into a persistent hum that vibrated just below conscious perception. Devils would sense it as vaguely threatening. Angels might mistake it for demonic corruption. But Kuroka, with her yokai heritage and centuries of magical study, recognized it as something altogether different. Ancient, hungry, patient. Land changed beneath her silent passage, pristine forest yielding to managed woodland, end to the manicured parks surrounding Kuo town. She paused at the boundary between wilderness and civilization, ears twitching atop her head as she filtered through overlapping sounds of the sleeping human settlement. There, a flicker of darkness deeper than natural shadow, moving with purpose through a residential district. Kuroka followed, curiosity overwhelming caution. Rumors had circulated her supernatural circles for weeks. Fallen angels gathering in unusual numbers, devil heirs establishing territory, magical artifacts activating after centuries of dormancy. All centered around this unremarkable human town. She tracked the darkness to a modest 2-story home where it slipped through an upstairs window. Extending her senses cautiously, Kuroka detected a single human presence inside, young, male. And surrounded by that strange emptiness that both was and wasn't power. "Interesting," she murmured, settling onto a neighboring rooftop to observe. Inside the Hyodo residence, Issei sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, eyes closed in concentration. A week had passed since the confrontation with fallen angels at Kuo Academy. 7 days of intensive training with Rias and her peerage, learning to control abilities that expanded hourly like unfurling shadows. "Steady," he whispered to himself as darkness gathered between his outstretched palms. Form and substance. Intent guides manifestation. The shadow sphere pulsed, edges oscillating between solid and vaporous. Maintaining consistent density had proven challenging, the shadows responding more to emotion than conscious direction. Frustration made them disperse, confidence gave them form, anger made them attack. Finding balance required meditative focus that still eluded him. Something brushed against his supernatural awareness, a presence outside. Watching. Not fallen angel or devil, but something equally powerful, equally inhuman. Without opening his eyes, Issei directed a tendril of shadow toward his window, extending his perception beyond physical boundaries. The sensation crystallized. Female, supernatural, neither angel nor devil. Curious rather than hostile, powerful but controlled. Relief tempered Issei's wariness. After a week of constant vigilance against fallen angel assassination attempts, curiosity seemed refreshingly benign. He opened his eyes, shadow sphere dissipating as his concentration broke. "I know you're there," he called toward the window, raising his voice just enough to carry. "If you're just watching, that's fine. If you're planning something unfriendly, reconsider." On the neighboring rooftop, Kuroka's lips curved in amusement. The boy had sensed her, impressive for a human, especially since she'd masked her presence out of habit. Either his supernatural awareness was exceptionally acute, or the darkness surrounding him enhanced his perceptions. Decision made, she vaulted across the space between buildings, landing silently on Issei's windowsill. The window slid open before she touched it, darkness pulling the latch from inside. Kuroka raised an eyebrow, noting the deliberate display of power. "Aren't you going to invite me in, Nya?" she asked, deliberately emphasizing the feline verbal tick. Issei studied the intruder with cautious interest. She appeared perhaps 20, though instinct suggested much greater age, with long black hair, golden eyes with vertical pupils, and an expression of feline amusement. Her kimono draped provocatively, revealing more than it concealed of generous curves. Most notably, 2 black cat ears perched atop her head, and twin tails swayed gently behind her. "You're yokai," Issei observed, recognizing the supernatural signature from Rias's descriptions. "Nekomata, specifically." You're well informed for a human." Kuroka slipped through the window, movements liquid and precise. "Though you're not entirely human anymore, are you?" Instead of answering, Issei allowed shadows to ripple across his fingertips, not threatening, merely demonstrative. "Why are you watching my house?" Curiosity. She prowled around his bedroom, examining textbooks and personal items with unabashed interest. "Something new entered our world recently. Something old wearing new skin. Devils buzz like agitated bees, fallen angels plot in shadows almost as dark as yours, and here I find a schoolboy at the center of it all. And what does a Nekomata care about supernatural politics?" Kuroka laughed softly, the sound reminiscent of purring. "Who said anything about politics? I follow interesting things." "You're very interesting, shadow boy." "Issei," he corrected. "Issei Hyodo." "Kuroka." She offered no family name, dropping gracefully onto his bed and stretching like her feline aspect. "Now, Issei Hyodo, why don't you tell me what you are?" Wariness warred with unexpected desire for conversation uncolored by fallen angel hostility or devil political calculation. This yokai, Kuroka, exuded dangerous capability but no immediate threat. Moreover, her perspective might provide insights the biblical factions lacked. "I'm becoming the Shadow Monarch," Issei answered, watching her reaction carefully. Kuroka's eyes widened briefly before narrowing in thought. "The elemental ruler, from before the biblical era. You know about it." "Myths and fragments. Eastern supernatural traditions maintain older records than Western factions." She leaned forward, interest sharpening. "The Shadow Monarch commanded armies of the dead and drew power from the boundary between living and deceased. A dangerous entity, that disappeared during the God of the Bible's ascendance." "That's consistent with what I've learned," Issei confirmed. "Somehow, I've inherited its power, or am becoming its new vessel." "Show me," Kuroka demanded, eyes gleaming with undisguised fascination. After brief consideration, Issei extended his hand toward the center of the room. Shadows gathered, coalescing into the now familiar Spanish conquistador. The shadow soldier knelt immediately, awaiting commands. Kuroka circled the manifestation, studying it from all angles. She extended one finger toward it, a small sphere of blue spirit energy forming at her fingertip. "May I?" she asked, surprisingly courteous. At Issei's nod, she pressed the energy sphere against the shadow soldier's armor. The sphere didn't penetrate but led across the surface like water on oil before dissipating. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Not necromancy in the traditional sense. This isn't a bound soul or reanimated corpse. It's..." She paused, searching for words. "An impression extracted from the boundary realm and given form through your power." Boundary realm. The space between living and dead. Where souls transition. Kuroka gestured vaguely. "Most supernatural factions have different names for it. Limbo, Bardo, the Veil. It's typically inaccessible except to death deities and specialized psychopomps. Yet I'm pulling shadows from it without understanding how. Issei mused. That's what makes you dangerous, and valuable. Kuroka's expression turned calculating. Every faction will either want you eliminated or controlled. The power to extract soldiers from fallen warriors throughout history. Devils would trade sacred treasures for such ability. I'm not interested in being anyone's weapon. Noble sentiment. Utterly impractical. She stretched again, kimono slipping further from her shoulder. Power demands application, Shadow Boy. Use it or lose it, often along with your life. Issei commanded the shadow soldier to return. Darkness flowing back into his own shadow. I'm choosing my own path. Not devil, not angel, not yokai. Something else entirely. The path of the Shadow Monarch. Kuroka's tone carried mingled skepticism and intrigue. Ambitious. Also potentially suicidal without allies. I have allies. Ah yes, the little devil princess and her collection of strays. Kuroka's dismissive wave. Suggested limited respect for Rias's peerage. Politically valuable in devil circles, perhaps, but limited in broader supernatural understanding. Irritation flickered through Issei. They've helped me navigate this transformation while protecting me from fallen angels trying to kill me. What are you offering besides criticism? Kuroka's eyes gleamed with something like approval. There it is, the monarch beneath the schoolboy. I offer perspective, Shadow Boy. Knowledge from traditions older than biblical factions. Understanding of yokai magics that might complement your developing abilities. Why would you help me? Who said anything about helping? She examined her nails casually. I'm proposing exchange. My knowledge for access to study this fascinating power awakening within you. The Shadow Monarch's abilities haven't been observed in millennia. Despite wariness, the offer tempted Issei. Rias and her peerage provided valuable support, but their knowledge came filtered through devil tradition and politics. An outside perspective, particularly from someone knowledgeable about Eastern supernatural traditions, might prove invaluable. I'll consider it, he finally said. But I need to know more about you first. Starting with why a powerful Nekomata is wandering alone instead of with her clan. Something dangerous flashed across Kuroka's features, there and gone so quick. Lee Issei might have imagined it if not for the sudden chill in the room. Perceptive, she acknowledged, voice cooler than before. Let's just say I had irreconcilable differences with certain authority figures. You're a stray, Issei realized, remembering Rias's explanations about supernatural classification systems. Like the fallen angels who left heaven, or devils who abandoned their masters. Such limiting terminology. Kuroka's smile didn't reach her eyes. I prefer independently aligned. Which means every faction considers you fair game. Only if they can catch me. Her posture remained relaxed, but Issei sensed coiled power beneath the casual exterior, a predator perpetually ready to fight or flee. Being hunted becomes routine after the 1st century. The casual reefer, NCE to her age reminded Issei how little he knew about yokai lifespans or culture. Another knowledge gap that highlighted the potential value of Kuroka's offer. A soft buzzing interrupted their conversation. Issei's phone displayed Rias's name, the late hour making the call obviously urgent. Go ahead, Kuroka said, gesturing toward the phone. I'd be interested to hear the little devil's reactee. On to finding a stray Nekomata in her territory. Issei accepted the call, placing it on speaker in a deliberate show of transparency. Rias, is everything okay? Issei. Relief colored her voice. Are you at home? Are you safe? I'm fine. What's happening? Our wards detected a powerful yokai signature entering Kuo an hour ago. It's been moving through town, apparently tracking something. Concern sharpened her tone. The energy reading suggests a stray Nekomata, extremely dangerous. Stay inside with your shadow soldiers ready until we reach you. Kuroka's amused expression grew increasingly smug as Rias continued. Golden eyes dancing with mischief. Actually, Rias, Issei interrupted, the yokai is here with me. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. What? Rias finally managed. Her name is Kuroka. She was curious about the Shadow Monarch power and tracked it to me. We're just talking. Issei. Rias's voice dropped to urgent whisper, if who I think is there, you're in the presence of an SS-class criminal wanted by multiple supernatural factions. She murdered her devil master and fled with forbidden techniques. She's extremely dangerous. Kuroka's expression kenned momentarily before settling into deliberate nonchalance. Such slander, NYA. Devil propaganda never changes. Is that her? Alarm raised Rias's pitch. Issei, keep her talking. We're 5 minutes away. Whatever she's offered you, don't trust. Kuroka reached over with casual speed, ending the call with one delicate finger. And now we have perhaps 4 minutes for uninterrupted conversation. On before your devil friends arrive prepared for battle. She studied Issei with renewed interest. What will you do, shadow boy? Call your soldiers, attack the dangerous criminal, or perhaps hear a story not told in devil records. Shadows stirred around Issei's feet, responding to his tension. The smart choice seemed obvious: restrain the self-admitted stray until Rias arrived with reinforcements. Yet instinct urged caution. Kuroka had made no threatening moves despite ample opportunity. Moreover, her knowledge might prove valuable beyond what devil sources provided. 3 minutes, Issei decided. Tell me your version. Appreciation flickered across Kuroka's features, not for mercy but for pragmatism. The official story. Powerful Nekomata serves Devil Master, learns forbidden senjutsu techniques, goes mad with power. Murders Master, flees justice. She settled more comfortably on the bed, expression growing distant. The reality. Young Nekomata and her sister are orphaned when humans destroy their village. Devils recruit them, salvation with strings attached. The elder shows talent for senjutsu and yokai magic, becoming valuable property. The younger demonstrates less potential. Kuroka's voice remained steady, but her tales lashed with suppressed emotion. My master experimented on young devil servants, seeking to artificially enhance their powers. When my sister was selected as his next subject, I eliminated the threat. Understanding dawned in Issei's eyes. You killed your master to protect your sister. Devils don't acknowledge such motivations for strays. Easier to label as power mad or feral. Bitterness tinged her casual tone. I escaped. My sister couldn't accompany me without becoming a stray herself, so I left her behind with the devils. She lives in this town now, serving your devil friend. Your sister is in Rias's peerage. Issei's mind raced through possibilities. Kaneko. Kuroka's eyes widened slightly. She calls herself that now. Her name is Sharon. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Kaneko's white hair and golden eyes, her unusual awareness of Issei's changing scent, her reluctance to discuss her past, all suggested Nekomata heritage deliberately suppressed. She doesn't use her yokai abilities, Issei said. She fights with physical strength alone. She fears becoming like me. Sadness flashed across Kuroka's face. Churish before her mask of casual indifference returned. Devils would have conditioned that fear, taught her to suppress her true nature. Safer that way, controlled. The contradiction between Devil ECORDS and Kuroka's account created a moral quandary with no easy resolution. Either she was a manipulative criminal spinning self-serving lies, or she was a sister who had sacrificed everything to protect her sibling from exploitation. The truth likely contained elements of both. Time's almost up, Kuroka noted, rising fluidly. What's your decision, Shadow Monarch? Enemy or potential ally? Issei stood as well, shadows gathering unconsciously around his feet. Neither yet. I need verification before choosing sides. Cautious. Wise. She nodded approvingly. I'll withdraw before your devil friends arrive ready for battle. We'll continue this conversation another time. Wait, Issei said as she moved toward the window. If what you've told me about Kaneko is true, why reveal yourself now? Why risk exposing your connection to her? Kuroka paused, something vulnerable flickering behind her golden eyes. Because the power awakening within you changes everything. The Shadow Monarch transcends faction politics. You might become something new, something that could protect Sharon when I cannot. With that cryptic statement, she slipped through the window and vanished into the night, leaving only the faint scent of exotic spices and forest earth behind. Moments later, crimson light filled Issei's bedroom as a transportation circle materialized. Rias emerged first, power crackling around her hands, followed by Akano, Kiba, and finally Kaneko. All four radiated battle readiness, scanning the room for threats. Where is she? Rias demanded, tension evident in her posture. Gone, Issei answered simply. She left when she sensed you coming. Relief and frustration wore on Rias's face. What did she want? What did she tell you? Issei's gaze moved to Kaneko, who stood rigidly by the door. Expression carefully blank despite the faint trembling of her small hands. Looking at her now, the resemblance to Kuroka seemed obvious, the same golden eyes, similar facial structure beneath different coloring. She was curious about the Shadow Monarch power, Issei answered, deliberately vague. She tracked the energy signature here. Did she threaten you? Try to recruit you? Rias pressed. No threats. She offered knowledge about yokai traditions that might help me understand my developing abilities. Akeno studied him closely. And you believed her? Kuroka is notoriously manipulative, Issei. Her senjutsu abilities allow her to influence emotions and cloud judgment. I maintained objective distance, Issei assured them, though uncertainty lingered. Had Kuroka subtly manipulated his perception? Her story about Kaneko felt genuine, but centuries-old yokai would certainly possess refined deception skills. Throughout the conversation, Kaneko remained silent. Golden eyes fixed on the windowsill where lingering traces of Kuroka's supernatural energy remained visible to enhanced senses. She mentioned you, Issei finally said, addressing Kaneko directly. Called you Sharon. The white-haired girl flinched visibly, eyes widening before narrowing into guarded slits. What else did she say? That she killed her master to protect you from experiments. Issei watched her reaction carefully. That she left you behind because going with her would have made you astray too. Conflict flickered across Kaneko's normally expressionless face, pain, anger, longing, and fear cycling in rapid succession before settling into forced neutrality. Kaneko doesn't need to discuss this, Rias interjected protectively. Kuroka abandoned her responsibilities. Is it true? Issei interrupted, still watching Kaneko. Did she kill him to protect you? Silence stretched taut before Kaneko finally whispered, I don't know. I was young. They told me she went mad with power. Her small fists clenched. But the master had been taking servants to his laboratory. They never returned the same. The admission hung heavy in the room, challenging official narratives and comfortable assumptions. Rias appeared genuinely troubled, suggesting she hadn't known these details of Kaneko's past. Regardless of her motives, Akeno said finally, Kuroka remains dangerous and unpredictable. Her interest in your powers is concerning, Issei. She offered knowledge, not allegiance, Issei clarified. Information about yokai traditions that might complement what I'm learning from devil sources. A tempting offer, Rias acknowledged reluctantly. Eastern supernatural systems understand certain metaphysical boundaries differently than biblical traditions. But the risk would be mine to manage. Issei completed. I'm not naive, Rias. I know she has her own agenda. But dismissing potentially valuable knowledge because of factional politics seems short-sighted. When I'm still learning to control these abilities. The argument carried weight, particularly given recent developments. Issei's shadow powers had grown exponentially over the past week, new capabilities emerging daily, requiring constant adaptation and learning. Information from diverse traditions could prove crucial for maintaining control during his accelerating transformation. We should increase patrols around Issei's home, Kiba suggested, breaking the tense silence. If Kuroka found him, others might follow. Agreed, Rias nodded. And perhaps accelerate our timeline for moving Issei to more secure accommodations. I'm not leaving my parents unprotected, Issei stated firmly. Then we extend protective wards to include them, Rias conceded. But Kuroka's appearance confirms T. Had knowledge of the Shadow Monarch's return is spreading through supernatural circles. We must prepare for increased interest, both scholarly and hostile. As the discussion turned to practical security arrangements, Kaneko approached Issei quietly, golden eyes searching his face. Did she? The white-haired girl began hesitantly. Did she seem well? The question carried layers of unresolved emotion, concern wrapped in hurt, longing tempered by betrayal. Despite her apparent anger toward her sister, Kaneko clearly still cared. She seemed strong, Issei answered honestly. Independent. And she cares about you, Kaneko. That much was obvious. Something like pain flashed across the small girl's features before she nodded once and stepped away, resuming her characteristic silence. After establishing enhanced security measures and confirming no other supernatural signatures in the vicinity, Rias prepared a transportation circle to return her peerage to their headquarters. Be vigilant, she cautioned Issei. If Kuroka returns, contact us immediately. Whatever knowledge she offers comes with hidden costs. I understand, Issei assured her. But I need to explore all avenues for understanding these powers. When they departed in crimson light, Issei returned to his meditation position, attempting to process the evening's revelations. Shadows gathered naturally around him, responding to his contemplative mood with gentle undulations across the floor. The contradictory narratives about Kuroka highlighted a broader truth about the supernatural world he'd entered. Perspective shaped reality, with each faction maintaining versions of history that supported their worldview. Devils portrayed Kuroka as a power-mad criminal. She presented herself as a sister forced to extreme measures to protect family. Both versions contained truth, likely neither was complete. As the Shadow Monarch, or its vessel, Issei occupied an unprecedented position outside established factions. That independence offered freedom but demanded caution. Every interaction carried potential manipulation, every alliance concealed possible exploitation. Shadows pulsed around him, forming the now familiar crown shape before dissolving back into formless darkness. The symbolic manifestation occurred with increasing frequency during moments of significant realization or decision, as if the Origi Null Shadow Monarch's consciousness approved certain thoughts or choices. I need to forge my own path, Issei whispered to the darkness. Neither devil nor angel nor yokai. Something new. The shadows rippled in apparent agreement. The following morning brought normalcy so jarring it felt surreal. Issei attended classes, responded to teachers' questions, and navigated school's social dynamic while processing the previous night's supernatural revelations. The mundane and extraordinary coexisted in uncomfortable proximity, calculus equations and shadow extraction techniques occupying the same mind. During lunch, Issei retreated to the occult research club room, finding solace in the one space where both aspects of his life aligned. To his surprise, Kaneko sat alone on the Victorian sofa, a book open but unread in her lap. Sorry, Issei apologized, turning to leave. I didn't realize anyone was here. Stay, Kaneko said quietly. I wanted to talk to you. Surprised by the typically silent girl's initiative, Issei settled into an armchair across from her. About Kuroka, Kaneko nodded, setting aside her untouched book. You should be careful. Ne-sama is complicated. Ne-sama, Issei repeated, noting the respectful honorific despite Kaneko's apparent resentment. She raised me after our parents died, Kaneko explained, eyes distant with memory. Protected me, taught me yokai traditions. Her small hands clenched in her lap. Then she killed our master and abandoned me. She said she left you behind to protect you from being labeled a stray. Maybe. Doubt colored Kaneko's voice. Or maybe the power corrupted her like everyone says. Senjutsu connects users to natural energy, including negative emotions and malice. It can overwhelm those who aren't careful. You're afraid of the same happening to you, Issei realized. That's why you suppress your yokai abilities. Kaneko's silence confirmed his assessment. What if there were a way to use those abilities safely? Issei suggested. The Shadow Monarch's power connects to boundaries between realms. Perhaps there's overlap with senjutsu techniques that could help you control your heritage without risking corruption. Hope flickered briefly across Kaneko's features before skepticism reasserted itself. Why would you help me with this? Because suppressing essential aspects of yourself causes more harm than controlling them. Issei answered, thinking of his own initial resistance to the Shadow Monarch's power. And because understanding different supernatural traditions helps me navigate my own transformation. Kaneko studied him with those penetrating golden eyes, seeing beyond surface motivations. You're changing faster than Bushu realizes. Your aura has shifted again since last night. The integration accelerates daily, Issei acknowledged. Each new ability catalyzes further transformation. Are you afraid? The question's simplicity belied its depth. Issei considered his answer carefully. Shadows unconsciously gathering around his feet as he contemplated. Not of the power itself, he finally said. But of losing myself in the process. Of becoming something that no longer values human connection or compassion. Understanding flashed in Kaneko's eyes, recognition of parallel fears despite different circumstances. That's why Ne-sama is drawn to you. You're navigating the same boundary she crossed, between human limitation and supernatural power. The insight carried surprising weight coming from the typically reticent girl. Do you think she regrets her choices? I don't know, Kaneko admitted, but she never tried to contact me after that day. Never explained, never apologized. Would you listen if she did? Kaneko fell silent, the question clearly striking deeper than expected. Before she could formulate an answer, the club room door opened to admit Rias and Akino, their animated conversation faltering as they noticed the serious atmosphere. Everything okay? Rias asked, concern evident in her voice. Just talking, Issei assured her with a smile that felt increasingly natural despite the serious subject matter. Kaneko was helping me understand yokai energy signatures better. The white-haired girl shot him a grateful glance for maintaining her privacy, then returned to her characteristic silence as club activities commenced. Throughout the afternoon, Issei found his thoughts returning to Kuroka and the complex relationship between the Nekomata sisters. Their situation highlighted the supernatural world's moral ambiguity. Why? Actions justified or condemned based on factional alignment rather than ethical consideration. As classes ended and students filtered from the academy grounds, Issei remained behind, drawn to the Quiet forest surrounding the old school building. Shadow extraction came more easily in natural settings, particularly areas with historical significance or proximity to death. The ancient trees had witnessed centuries of history, their roots intertwining with bones long forgotten. He pressed his palm against a massive oak, shadows flowing from his fingertips into the bark. His perception extended downward, sensing impressions left in soil and stone, echo memories of those who had walked these grounds throughout history. Arise, he whispered, focusing on the strongest impression. Darkness pooled at the tree's base, coalescing into the form of a Shinto priest who had tended this land centuries before Kuo Academy's construction. The shadow figure knelt respectfully, traditional robes and ceremonial implements rendered in perfect detail despite being formed from living darkness. Shadow extraction successful, the priest intoned. This unit served as Kanushi for the Inari shrine that once stood upon this hill. How may I serve the Shadow Monarch? Tell me about the supernatural beings that inhabited this region historically, Issei requested, seating himself cross-legged before the shadow. The priest's featureless face tilted thoughtfully. This land marked boundary between yokai forest territories and human settlements. Kitsune served Inari to the north, Tengu maintained mountain sanctuaries to the east, while Nekomata clans patrolled forests to the west. Nekomata clans. Issei leaned forward with interest. What happened to them? Conflict with expanding human populations diminished their numbers during the Meiji period. Survivors integrated into yokai society in Kyoto or formed pacts with devil families seeking yokai abilities. The information aligned with fragments Kuroka had shared but provided historical context she'd omitted. What about senjutsu traditions among Nekomata? Senjutsu represents the highest achievement of yokai spiritual development. Communion with natural energy that transcends physical limitations. Among Nekomata, such techniques were closely guarded, taught only to those who demonstrated both talent and emotional stability. Because the power could corrupt users. Quote, balance defines senjutsu, the shadow priest explained. Practitioners must maintain internal harmony while channeling external energies. Emotional instable, ity creates vulnerability to malice inherent in natural forces. So if someone experienced extreme emotional trauma while using senjutsu, corruption becomes likely, the priest confirmed. Unli. Counterbalanced by equally powerful positive emotional anchors. The explanation provided crucial context for understanding Kuroka's circumstances. If she had witnessed her master threatening her sister while actively using senjutsu, the emotional trauma could have potentially triggered instability, explaining both her extreme reaction and subsequent classification as corrupted. Thank you for this knowledge, Issei said, preparing to dismiss the shadow extraction. One moment, my liege, the priest interrupted, tone shifting subtly. This unit detects another presence observing our interaction. Issei extended his supernatural awareness outward, immediately recognizing the energy signature from the previous night. You can show yourself, Kuroka. I know you're there. Laughter rippled through the trees before the Nekomata materialized from seemingly empty air, perched casually on a nearby branch. Your detection abilities are improving, Shadow Boy. Yesterday you merely sensed a presence. Today you identified me specifically. She dropped gracefully to the ground, eyeing the shadow priest with undisguised curiosity. Extracting local historical knowledge. Clever application of your abilities. Return, Issei commanded, the priest dissolving into particles that flowed back into his shadow. Such obedience, Kuroka observed. Your shadows serve without question or resistance. Quite different from yokai familiars, who maintain independent will despite binding contracts. They retain personality and knowledge but not independence, Issei explained. The extraction process fundamentally changes their nature. A shame. Healthy contradiction improves leadership. She circled him with feline grace, studying his appearance. Your aura has developed since yesterday, darker, more defined. The integration accelerates. That seems to be the consensus. Issei maintained calm despite her proximity, shadows unconsciously gathering around his feet. Why are you here, Kuroka? This close to the devil's headquarters seems risky for a stray. Risk and reward balance each other, NYA. She stretched languorously, kimono slipping provocatively from one shoulder. I've decided to invest in your potential. Shadow Monarch. Your conversation with my sister suggested philosophical compatibility. Wariness sharpened Issei's tone. You were eavesdropping, observing from safe distance. She corrected without remorse. Sharon's well-being concerns me, despite what devil propaganda suggests. You abandoned her. I protected her from the consequences of my actions, Kuroka countered. Golden eyes flashing. A child labeled stray would have been executed immediately. By leaving her with the devils, I ensured her survival while accepting isolation as my burden. The explanation carried emotional weight that suggested genuine conviction rather than rehearsed justification. Whatever Kuroka's flaws, her concern for Kaneko appeared authentic. What do you mean by investing in my potential? Issei asked, redirecting the conversation. I'm offering tutelage in yokai traditions relevant to your developing abilities. She produced a small silk pouch from within her kimono. Beginning with these, she emptied the pouch into her palm, revealing 5 magatama beads carved from black jade, each inscribed with ancient symbols that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Boundary markers, Kuroka explained, used by ancient onmyoji to establish controlled domains between living and spirit realms. They might help stabilize your shadow extraction process, reducing energy consumption while increasing precision. Issei studied the artifacts with cautious interest. And what do you want in exchange? Access to observe your development, she answered immediately. The Shadow Monarch's awakening represents unprecedented metaphysical significance. I wish to document the transformation from academic perspective. Academic. Skepticism colored Issei's response. You're suddenly a supernatural researcher. I've accumulated considerable knowledge over centuries, Kuroka replied, mild offense in her tone. My understanding of boundary mechanics exceeds most living practitioners. The Senjutsu tradition I mastered specifically focuses on realm interfaces, where your shadow powers operate. The offer tempted Issei despite lingering doubts about Kuroka's trustworthiness. Rias and her peerage provided valuable support but approached his abilities through devil paradigms. Yokai traditions might offer complementary perspectives, particularly regarding the boundary realms his powers accessed. I need to discuss this with Rias, Issei decided. Any arrangement affecting my development should include all current allies. Kuroka's expressio N suggested limited enthusiasm for devil involvement, but she nodded agreement. Reasonable, if naive. The little princess won't welcome competition for your loyalty. It's not about loyalty but transparency, Issei corrected. Working with multiple factions requires open communication to prevent misunderstandings. How diplomatic, Kuroka purred, amusement evident in her golden eyes. Very well, I'll present my proposal to the devil princess, assuming she doesn't attack on sight. I'll ensure she doesn't, Issei promised. Meet us at the Occult Research Club room tomorrow after classes end. So trusting, Kuroka mused, head tilting curiously. I could be leading you into elaborate deception, yet you arrange formal meetings as if dealing with recognized authorities instead of a notorious criminal. If you intended harm, you've had multiple opportunities, Issei pointed out, and your knowledge about boundary realms aligns with what I've learned from other sources. Until proven otherwise, I'm treating your interest as genuine. Something unexpected flashed across Kuroka's features, surprise, perhaps, or momentary vulnerability quickly concealed behind her customary playful mask. Interesting perspective from the vessel of darkness, she remarked, recovering her casual demeanor. Most would assume the worst from a stray with my reputation. I'm forming my own judgments. Rather than accepting others' assumptions, Issei replied. The same courtesy I'd hoped for regarding my own transformation. Kuroka studied him with renewed intensity, as if seeing beyond surface appearance to the evolving entity beneath. The Shadow Monarch chose its vessel well, she finally said. Until tomorrow. Then, she vanished between one heartbeat and the next, not teleporting but moving with supernatural speed that even Issei's enhanced perception barely registered. Only lingering traces of her unique energy signature confirmed she had been physically present rather than an illusion. Issei remained in the forest clearing, contemplating the implications of Kuroka's offer and his own accelerating transformation. The Magatama beads she had shown represented tangible assistance rather than empty promises, specific tools designed for boundary manipulation that might genuinely complement his developing abilities. Yet her reputation and status as a stray yokai created undeniable complications. Rias would view Kuroka's involvement with justified suspicion. Kaniko's emotional response to her sister's reappearance added further complexity to an already delicate situation. Shadows swirled around Issei's feet, forming patterns that reflected his conflicted thoughts. The darkness responded increasingly to his subconscious rather than conscious direction, an evolution that both simplified control and complicated intentional manipulation. Balance, he murmured, recalling the Shadow Priest's explanation of senjutsu principles. Internal harmony while channeling external energies. The concept resonated with his developing understanding of shadow manipulation. Emotions affected manifestation. Fear created defensive shadows, anger generated offensive projections, confidence enabled precise extraction. Maintaining emotional balance while accessing increasing power represented his greatest ongoing challenge. As twilight descended over Kuo Academy, Issei made his decision. He would accept Kuroka's offer of yokai knowledge while maintaining alliance with Rias and her peerage. The Shadow Monarch transcended traditional faction boundaries, its vessel should likewise draw wisdom from diverse traditions rather than limiting himself to single perspectives. With renewed purpose, Issei extended his awareness into surrounding shadows, practicing the detection techniques he'd been developing. Multiple supernatural signatures registered at varying distances, the steady pulse of devil energy from the old school building, the barely perceptible hum of protective wards throughout campus, and fainter traces of Kuroka's distinctive yokai presence retreating toward the distant mountains. Most intriguingly, he detected something else, a whisper of power similar to his own, ancient and patient. Observing from considerable distance, when he attempted to focus on this presence, it withdrew immediately, vanishing from his supernatural perception. I'm not the only one, Issei realized aloud. There are others connected to the monarchs. The implication carried profound significance. If other elemental monarchs had survived through human vessels, the supernatural RLD contained powers outside traditional biblical faction classifications, potential allies or enemies depending on their disposition toward the Shadow Monarch. Night fell completely as Issei made his way back to the Occult Research Club room, where Rias waited with barely concealed concern. You've been practicing shadow extraction in the forest, she observed, the statement carrying unspoken questions about his independent activities. Learning to access historical impressions from the land, Issei confirmed. And I encountered Kuroka again. Alarm flashed across Rias's features. Did she threaten you? Try to. She offered specific assistance with my abilities, Issei interrupted gently. Knowledge about boundary realms that might help stabilize my developing powers. I invited her meet with us tomorrow to discuss possible collaboration. Rias's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, concern, and calculation before settling into cautious consideration. That's unexpected. Kuroka typically avoids devil territory entirely, let alone formal meetings. Her interest appears genuine, Issei explained. She specifically mentioned techniques for controlling realm interfaces where shadow extraction operates. And what does she want in exchange? The question demonstrated Rias's understanding of supernatural politics. Nothing came without reciprocal obligation. Observation rights. Documentation of the Shadow Monarch's awakening from yokai perspective. Rias paced thoughtfully, crimson hair swaying with each measured step. From strictly pragmatic standpoint, boundary knowledge could indeed complement our understanding. Eastern traditions maintain certain metaphysical connections that biblical systems never developed. But you're concerned about Kuroka specifically, Issei guessed. Her reputation isn't entirely fabrication, Issei. Whatever her motivations for killing her master, the act demonstrated both tremendous power and willingness to apply it lethally. Moreover, her connection to Kaneko creates emotional complications for my peerage. I understand your concerns, Issei acknowledged. But dismissing potentially valuable knowledge because of factional politics seems short-sighted when I'm still learning to control these abilities. Rias smiled wryly at hearing her own words from the previous night repeated back to her. Using my arguments against me. You're learning devil debate tactics already. Just applying consistent reasoning, Issei countered with a smile of his own. After further discussion of security precautions and diplomatic considerations, Rias eventually agreed to the proposed meeting, with specific conditions regarding protective measures and communication protocols. As Issei departed for home, he reflected on the day's developments with cautious optimism. The Shadow Monarch's awakening had initially seemed a burden, unwanted power forcing transformation and attracting dangerous attention. Increasingly, however, it represented unprecedented opportunity to bridge supernatural factions traditionally separated by theological and political differences. If the vessel of the Shadow Monarch could maintain productive relationships with devils, yokai, and potentially other elemental monarchs, perhaps new alliances might form beyond traditional boundaries. Such unity could address threats that endangered all supernatural beings regardless of faction. The shadows lengthened around Issei as he walked, stretching toward him like eager companions rather than mere absence of light. His transformation continued accelerating, integration proceeding faster than anyone had anticipated. Yet for the first time since shadows began moving independently in his bedroom, Issei felt genuinely optimistic about his evolving nature. He was becoming something beyond human, something ancient and powerful. But unlike the original Shadow Monarch, isolated in its singular domain, Issei would forge connections across supernatural divides, creating something new from traditions old as creation itself. Starting with a stray Nekomata whose golden eyes held secrets older than biblical factions and whose complicated history mirrored the moral ambiguity of the world he now inhabited. Tomorrow's meeting would mark the beginning of either productive alliance or complicated entanglement. Either way, the Shadow Monarch's path grew increasingly clear. Not isolation but integration, not domination but cooperation, not darkness alone but shadow balanced with light. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Converging Factions. Afternoon sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across the occult research club room. Rias Grimori sat behind her ornate desk, outwardly composed despite the tension evident in her rigid posture. Akano stood at her right shoulder, while Kiba positioned himself casually near the door, strategic placement disguised as relaxed confidence. Only Kaneko's location revealed genuine emotion. The small Nekomata having chosen a window seat as far from the meeting area as possible while remaining in the room. Issei occupied the space between these established positions, physically representing his evolving status as neither fully aligned with the devil peerage nor entirely independent. Shadows pooled subtly around his feet, responding to the room's charged atmosphere without his conscious direction. She's late, Rias observed, checking an antique clock on the mantelpiece. She'll come, Issei replied with certainty he couldn't entirely explain. The knowledge exchange benefits both sides. The air shimmered suddenly near the center of the room, reality distorting as space folded inward. Unlike the crimson flash of devil teleportation circles, this manifestation resembled heat haze above summer asphalt, transparent ripples gradually solidifying into Kuroka's distinctive form. My apologies for the theatrical entrance, she purred, golden eyes scanning the assembled devils with calculated awareness of their strategic positions. Standard teleportation would trigger your perimeter wards. This method seemed more diplomatic. Folding space rather than traversing it, Akano observed with professional interest despite her wariness. Impressive application of yokai dimensional theory. Basic technique for those who understand boundary principles. Kuroka replied with deliberate casualness, though Issei noted how her eyes briefly tracked to Kaneko before focusing on Rias. Shall we proceed with formal introductions, or has everyone already memorized my extensive list of alleged crimes? We know who you are, Rias stated evenly. The question remains. What exactly are you offering Issei, and why? Kuroka settled gracefully into an unclaimed armchair, arranging her kimono with practiced elegance. Direct approach. Refreshing from a devil, she produced the black jade magatama beads she had shown Issei previously. These boundary markers represent basic tools for manipulating realm interfaces, where the Shadow Monarch's powers primarily operate. She placed the artifacts on the coffee table, continuing her explanation without waiting for response. Eastern metaphysical traditions maintained different conceptual frameworks for afterlife realms than Western systems. Where biblical factions established clear divisions between heaven, hell, and earth. Yokai traditions recognized gradients of existence, overlapping domains where spiritual and physical realities intersect. Like the boundary realm where shadow soldiers originate, Issei added, connecting concepts from their previous conversation. Precisely. Kuroka nodded approvingly. These magatama allow controlled access to those gradient spaces, potentially stable. Easing extraction processes while reducing energy expenditure. Rias leaned forward, professional curiosity temporarily overriding political caution. And you're offering these artifacts and associated knowledge freely. Why? Not freely. In exchange for observation rights. Kuroka's expression shifted from casual to intensely focused. The Shadow Monarch's reemergence represents unprecedented metaphysical significance. Documentation from multiple tradition perspectives serves both academic and practical purposes. You expect us to believe your interest is scholarly. Akino's skepticism carried thinly veiled hostility. Believe what you wish about my motives, Kuroka replied with a dismissive shrug. The knowledge remains valuable regardless of why it's offered. Throughout this exchange, Issei observed subtle currents beneath spoken words. Kuroka's deliberate provocation balanced against genuine knowledge, Rias's strategic assessment, Akino's protective wariness. Most revealing was what remained unspoken. Kaniko's rigid silence at the window and the careful way Kuroka avoided directly addressing her sister despite evident awareness of her presence. The boundary markers appear genuine, Rias finally acknowledged. And yokai traditions certainly maintained different understandings of realm interfaces than devil methodologies. The potential benefit to Issei's development seems substantial. But you remain concerned about my trustworthiness, Kuroka completed, amusement touching her golden eyes. Understandable, given factional histories. Perhaps a demonstration would prove more convincing than continued debate. Without waiting for permission, she lifted one magatama between delicate fingers. The black jade seemed to absorb surrounding light as she channeled yokai energy through it. Not the crackling power of devil magic but something subtler, like water flowing through invisible channels. Shadow boy, she addressed Issei directly, attempt an extraction while I establish boundary stabilization. Issei glanced at Rias, who nodded cautious permission. He extended his hand, focusing on shadow extraction techniques he'd been practicing daily. Darkness gathered around his fingertips, flowing outward to form the now familiar conquistador shadow soldier. As the extraction process began, Kuroka placed the energized magatama on the floor between them. The effect manifested immediately. Where shadow extraction typically felt like pulling heavy weight through a resistant medium, the magatama created something akin to lubrication, reducing friction between realms. The soldier formed with remarkable ease, requiring noticeably less energy expenditure than previous manifestations. Shadow extraction successful, the soldier intoned, kneeling with customary deference. This unit detects boundary stabilization field. Extraction efficiency increased by approximately 63%. Rias's eyes widened slightly, the only outward indication of her surprise at the significant improvement. The energy conservation implications alone justify further exploration of these techniques. Particularly as Shadow Boy's abilities continue expanding, Kuroka agreed. Satisfaction evident in her tone. The magatama function optimally when arranged in specific geometric patterns corresponding to extraction purpose. For the next hour, conversation remained surprisingly productive despite underlying tensions. Kuroka demonstrated various magatama arrangements while explaining associated yokai theories about boundary realms. Rias and Akino contributed ill perspectives on dimensional interfaces, creating unexpectedly complementary knowledge exchange. Even Kiba participated occasionally, describing how his sword birth ability interacted with conceptua. Boundaries between physical and idealized forms. Only Kaneko maintained complete silence, watching proceedings with unreadable golden eyes that occasionally tracked to her sister when she believed no one was looking. As technical discussion progressed, Issei experimented with the boundary markers under Kuroka's guidance, extracting different shadow soldiers with varying specializations, from an ancient Egyptian architect who analyzed the room's structural design to a medieval European alchemist who provided obscure metaphysical insights. The efficiency improvement is remarkable, Issei acknowledged as he dismissed the latest extraction. I could maintain multiple soldiers much longer with these stabilization fields. Boundary manipulation represents one of many yokai traditions relevant to your developing abilities. Kuroka noted. Senjutsu techniques might similarly enhance your connection to the realm interfaces where shadow imprints reside. At the mention of senjutsu, Kaneko visibly tensed, drawing Kuroka's attention for the first time since her arrival. Something complex passed between the sisters, and spoken communication loaded with history and emotion. Senjutsu carries significant risks, Rias interjected, clearly noting Kaneko's reaction, particularly regarding negative energy corruption. Only when improperly balanced, Kuroka corrected, her casual tone belly ed by the intensity in her golden eyes as they remained fixed on Kaneko. With proper training and emotional anchoring, practitioners maintain harmony while channeling natural energies. Is that what happened to you? Kaneko's voice startled everyone, her first words since the meeting began carrying accusatory sharpness. Proper balance and emotional anchoring. Silence descended instantly. Kuroka's playful demeanor faltered, genuine emotion bleeding through her carefully maintained facade. Different circumstances, she replied softly. Different choices. You abandoned me, Kaneko stated flatly. Tiny hands clenched in her lap. I protected you from the consequences of my actions, Kuroka countered, previous lecturing tone replaced by something raw. A child labeled stray would have been executed immediately. You never came back, never explained. Never even tried to contact me. Would you have welcomed such contact? Or would it have endangered the new life you built? Genuine pain flickered across Kuroka's features before her mask reasserted itself. The past remains unchangeable, Sharon. I made choices with consequences for us both. The exchange revealed layers beyond official records, genuine hurt and complicated love beneath years of separation and misunderstanding. Whatever Kuroka's crimes, her concern for her sister appeared authentic rather than calculated manipulation. Before further personal conversation could develop, a distinctive sensation crawled up Issei's spine, shadow awareness detecting approaching supernatural presence unlike any he'd previously encountered. Ancient power, vast and primal, moving purposefully toward their location. Something's coming, he announced, rising to his feet as shadows gathered instinctively around him. Something powerful. Rias extended her senses outward, alarm registering immediately. Dragon energy signature. Extremely powerful. Beyond ultimate class. Dragon. Kuroka's casual posture vanished instantly, replaced by battle-ready alertness. Which one? Unknown, Rias answered, crimson power gathering around her hands, but approaching directly and making no attempt to conceal its presence. Deliberate demonstration of confidence, Akeno observed grimly. It wants us to know it's coming. Issei extended his shadow awareness further, probing the approaching entity's nature. The impressio, crystallized with startling clarity, ancient beyond human comprehension, power accumulated through millennia of existence, intelligence sharp as mountain peaks and deep as ocean trenches. It's coming specifically for me, he realized aloud. It's tracking the Shadow Monarch's energy signature. Before anyone could respond, the sky outside darkened momentarily as something massive passed before the sun. A thunderous impact shook the entire building as something landed on the academy grounds, something far larger than the old school building itself. Hiba moved to the window, sword materializing in his hand. You might want to see this. They crowded around the window to witness an impossible sight. A dragon easily 70 meters long coiled on the academy grounds, sapphire scales gleaming like polished gemstones in the afternoon light. Its massive head alone matched the size of a city bus, golden eyes containing intelligence that made Issei's breath catch in his throat. Tiamat, Kuroka whispered, rare genuine fear coloring her voice. The Chaos Karma Dragon, one of the 5 dragon kings. Why would a dragon king come here? Rias asked. tension evident despite her composed exterior. The dragon's head swiveled toward their window with unnerving precision. When it spoke, the voice bypassed physical sound, manifesting directly in their minds with overwhelming presence. Shadow Monarch vessel, I would speak with you. Asterisk. The mental voice carried such authority that Issei stepped forward automatically before conscious thought asserted itself. Is this a friendly conversation or hostile confrontation? He called out the window, shadows swirling protectively around him. The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, something like amusement flickering in those ancient eyes. Neither yet. Determination pending our exchange. Asterisk. Rias placed a restraining hand on Issei's arm. Tiamat is an ultimate class being, Issei. Approach with extreme caution. The little princess speaks wisdom, Kuroka added. Uncharacteristic seriousness replacing her typical playfulness. Dragon kings predate biblical factions. Their motivations transcend conventional politics. Issei considered the limited options. Refusing dialogue with such a powerful entity seemed foolhardy, particularly one that had announced its presence openly rather than attacking without warning. Conversely, approaching without precaution might prove equally dangerous. I'll meet with her, he decided. But not alone. Her, Akeno questioned. Dragon kings can assume human form, Kuroka explained. Amat typically manifests as female when interacting with humanoid species. As if confirming this assessment, the massive dragon began glowing with intense blue light. Its form contracted rapidly, power condensing rather than diminishing. Until a woman stood where the dragon had been moments before. Even from the window, her inhuman beauty registered immediately, tall and regal with sapphire hair cascading to her waist. Golden eyes maintaining their draconic vertical pupils, and an aura of ancient power that manifested visibly as subtle blue flames dancing across her pale skin. Her attire resembled ceremonial armor from civilizations long forgotten, crafted from what appeared to be dragon scales rather than metal. I await. Shadow Monarch, her voice continued directly in their minds despite her humanoid appearance. We'll accompany you, Rias stated, clearly intended as non-negotiable. As will I, Kuroka added, golden eyes assessing the dragon woman with calculating wariness. Quote, diverse faction representation provides diplomatic balance. The unexpected alliance between Devil Heiress and Stray Nekomata highlighted the unusual situation, Tiamat's appearance transcending normal. Supernatural politics through sheer power disparity. Against a dragon king, traditional faction rivalries became temporarily irrelevant. They descended to the academy grounds as a unified group, approaching the dragon woman with respectful caution. Up close, Tiamat's human form proved even more intimidating, power compressed to human scale rather than diminished, like a star contained within glass sphere. I am Issei Hyodo, he introduced himself formally, stopping at conversational distance. Vessel of the Shadow Monarch. These are my allies. Rias Ramori of Devil Faction, and Kuroka of Yokai Tradition. Tiamat's golden eyes studied him with unnerving intensity, seeing beyond physical appearance to the evolving entity beneath. Interesting, she said, now speaking aloud though her voice carried the same ancient resonance. The Shadow Monarch's essence merges differently with each vessel. Your integration proceeds unusually rapidly. You've encountered previous vessels? Issei asked, surprised. The last manifested briefly during what humans called their Second World War, Tiamat confirmed. A Japanese soldier who inherited the essence but perished before full integration completed. Before him, a Mongolian shaman during the 13th century achieved partial transformation before being eliminated by angelic intervention. The casual reference to centuries spanning OBS. Irvation reminded everyone of the vast age difference between dragons and other supernatural species. What constituted recent history for Tiamat encompassed multiple human generations. Why have you sought me specifically? Issei asked, maintaining respectful but direct approach. Tiamat circled him slowly, examining his aura from multiple angles with draconic thoroughness. Your body contains TWO significant power signatures, the Shadow Monarch's darkness and traces of Red Dragon Emperor essence. This unprecedented combination drew my attention. Red Dragon Emperor, Issei repeated, genuinely confused. I don't understand. You possess latent sacred gear compatibility with Dedrake, one of the heavenly dragons, Tiamat explained, her tone shifting subtly at the name. Though the Shadow Monarch's integration has superseded sacred gear manifestation, draconic resonance remains within your spiritual framework. Rias stepped forward, professional curiosity temporarily overriding caution. Are you suggesting Issei would have become boosted gear wielder if not for the Shadow Monarch's intervention? Precisely. Fate rarely arranges such potential within single vessel without purpose. Tiamat's golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The question becomes, coincidence or design? Random convergence or deliberate orchestration? The implication raised disturbing possibilities, that is, Ai's inheritance of the Shadow Monarch's power might not have been chance occurrence but calculated placement. But orchestrated by whom? And to what purpose? You believe someone arranged this? Kuroka asked, intelligence sharp behind her casual demeanor. Which factions possess capability for such metaphysical manipulation? Few entities could coordinate power transference of this magnitude, Tiamat acknowledged. Fewer still would recognize potential synchronicity between draconic and shadow essences. Throughout this exchange, Issei processed implications with growing unease. His transfo, Armashin had seemed random circumstance, wrong place, wrong time resulting in inheritance of ancient power. The suggestion of deliberate design added troubling layer to his already complicated situation. What is your interest in this matter? He asked Tiamat directly. Why does my dual nature concern a dragon king? Something dangerous flashed in Tiamat's golden eyes, ancient grudges and complicate. History compressed into momentary expression. Drag and I share history. Any vessel bearing his essence warrants my attention, regardless of additional complications. The deliberate vagons, suggested personal rather than political motivation, unusual for beings of Tiamat's stature, who typically operated beyond individual concerns. Is your interest friendly or hostile? Issei pressed, shadows unconsciously gathering around his feet. That depends entirely on your actions moving forward, Tiamat replied with draconic directness. The Shadow Monarch historically maintained isolation from other factions. Your association with devils and yokai suggests different approach, one potentially beneficial or catastrophic depending on implementation. The assessment carried neither approval nor condemnation, merely observation from perspective spanning millennia of supernatural politics. Tiamat clearly operated beyond conventional faction allegiances, her interests determined by Krite. Most younger beings couldn't fully comprehend. I'm forging my own path, Issei stated with quiet conviction. Neither isolation nor conquest guides my development. I seek understanding and cooperation across traditional boundaries. Noble sentiment, Tiamat observed without evident cynicism. Whether practical implementation matches idealistic declaration remains to be demonstrated. Before further conversation could develop, Issei's shadow awareness detected multiple energy signatures approaching rapidly, the now familiar resonance of fallen angels moving with clear purpose toward the academy. We have company, he announced, turning toward the approaching signatures. Fallen angels, at least 8, moving fast. Tiamat's expression shifted to mild irritation rather than concern. Your emergence attracts multiple factions simultaneously. Inconvenient but predictable. The first fallen angel appeared above the academy grounds, black wings spread impressively against the afternoon sky. Unlike the lower-ranked angels who had attacked previously, this one radiated power comparable to high-class devils, crimson light spear manifesting in his hand as he surveyed the assembled group below. Kokabeel, Rias identified, tension evident in her voice. Cadre-class fallen angel, veteran of the Great War. 7 additional fallen angels materialized beside their leader, forming precise military formation that demonstrated centuries of battlefield experience. Unlike Raynor's hastily assembled group, these warriors moved with coordinated precision that suggested professional soldiers rather than opportunistic rogues. Curious gathering, Kokabeel called down, voice carrying easily despite the distance. Devils, yokai, dragon, and the anomaly hour scouts reported. How diplomatically progressive. Tiamat regarded the fallen angels with expression suggesting mild annoyance rather than genuine concern, a human observing ants crossing their picnic blanket. Kokabeel, still, serving as Azazel's errand boy after all these millennia. The fallen angel leader's expression darkened momentarily before smoothing into deliberate neutrality. Lord Azazel sends greetings to all assembled parties and requests information regarding the energy anomaly recently manifested in Kuo Town. Requests or demands? Kuroka challenged, stepping closer to Issei in subtle but clear indication of alignment. Lord Azazel prefers diplomatic resolution where possible, Kokabeel replied with practiced smoothness that suggested the opposite of his words. The sudden emergence of pre-Bibli Cal power signatures naturally concerns all factions invested in maintaining current equilibrium. Issei studied the fallen angel's aura through shadow perception, detecting layers beneath the diplomatic exterior, ambition cloaked in organizational loyalty, resentment disguised as duty, and something darker lurking deeper still. While Kokabeel's words suggested peaceful information gathering, his essence projected barely restrained aggression. I am the vessel of the Shadow Monarch, Issei stated directly, seeing little value in concealing what multiple factions already knew. My transformity concerns me personally but threatens no established factions or territories. Kokabeel's eyes narrowed, assessing Issei with ancient intelligence honed through countless conflicts. The Shadow Monarch historically commanded armies drawn from the deceased. Such power inherently disrupts established faction boundaries and afterlife claims. My abilities access shadow impressions, not souls, Issei clarified. Understanding the theological concern, the extraction process draws from boundary realms rather than established afterlives. An unverified claim, Kokabeel countered. Lord Azazel requests your presence at Grigori headquarters for thorough evaluation of these abilities and their implications for existing accords. The careful phrasing barely disguised the implicit threat, coup, ration or confrontation representing the only available options. Despite diplomatic terminology, Kokabeel's request constituted thinly veiled demand backed by military presence. Before Issei could formulate response, Tiamat stepped forward, blue flames dancing more intensely across her skin. The Shadow Monarch vessel currently engages in diplomatic exchange with draconic representatives, she stated. Authority resonating through her voice. Grigori inquiries must be scheduled through appropriate channels. The fallen angel leader visibly hesitated, calculation replacing immediate aggression as he reassessed the situation. Confronting devils and yokai presented acceptable risk, antagonizing a dragon king significantly altered the strategic equation. Of course, Kokabeel conceded with actic grace that failed to mask his frustration. Lord Azazel merely wishes to extend invitation for peaceful dialogue regarding these developing circumstances. Your invitation is acknowledged, Rias responded formally, asserting her territorial authority as Kuos Devil Administrator. Appropriate communications will follow through established protocols. The exchange represented supernature, politics distilled to its essence, power assertions and boundary declarations couched in diplomatic terminology while each faction assessed others' capabilities and intentions. Despite outward civility, the underlying message remained clear. Multiple powerful entities now monitored the Shadow Monarch's emergence, each with distinct agendas regarding its potential applications. As the fallen angels withdrew with reluctant formality, Tiamat turned her ancient gaze back to Issei. Your emergence accelerates factional convergence. Biblical representatives, yokai observers, draconic interests, all now orbit your developing power. How you navigate these competing influences will determine whether your transformation brings equilibrium or catastrophe. I never asked for this attention, Issei noted with wry resignation. Few who alter supernatural dynamics do. Tiamat's expression softened marginally, revealing momentary glimpse of the wisdom accumulated through millennia. Power attracts attention regardless of wielder's intentions. The Shadow Monarch's essence merged with draconic compatibility creates unprecedented potential, both constructive and destructive. She extended her hand, palm upward, as small blue flame materialized above her fingers. Should you require neutral arbitration in future factional negotiations, you may summon me through this essence fragment. The aim floated from her hand to hover before Issei, neither hot nor cold despite its apparent nature. When he cautiously accepted it, the fire dissolved into his skin, leaving behind sensation of dormant connection, accessible but not intrusive. Why offer this assistance? Issei asked, genuinely curious about the dragon's motivations. Something complex flickered across Tiamat's ageless features, amusement, interest, and calculation in equal measure. Your dual nature presents rare opportunity to observe unprecedented power synthesis. Academic curiosity, you might say. The explanation felt incomplete but not dishonest. One facet of more complex motivation that probably extended beyond human comprehension. Like Kuroka's scholarly interest, Tiamat's curiosity seemed genuine if not comprehensive. With that cryptic statement, the Dragon King inclined her head in formal acknowledgement before blue light enveloped her form. The human shape expanded rapidly, power unfolding rather than increasing, until the massive sapphire dragon once again dominated the academy grounds. With single powerful downbeat of wings that generated windstorms strong enough to bend nearby trees, Tiamat launched skyward, disappearing into clouds with surprising speed for a creature of her size. In her wake, the assembled group exchanged significant glances, the afternoon's events having dramatically expanded the scope of Issei's situation beyond previous understanding. Well, Kuroka broke the silence, characteristic playfulness returning to her voice. That was certainly more exciting than our boundary marker demonstration. A Dragon King and Cadre class fallen angel in single afternoon, Rias mused, professional calculation evident beneath her composed exterior. Your emergence attracts increasingly significant attention, Issei. Not by choice, he replied, shadows unconsciously swirling around his feet in response to his mixed emotions. I'm still adjusting to these abilities, let alone their political implications. Choice becomes increasingly irrelevant, Kuroka observed with uncharacteristic seriousness. The Shadow Monarch's awakening represents power shift that no major faction can ignore. They will each seek alliance, control, or neutralization according to their interests. The assessment, while blunt, accurately captured Issei's evolving situation. His transformation from ordinary student to supernatural focal point had progressed with disorienting speed. Weekly training sessions with Rias's peerage suddenly seeming inadequate preparation for navigating complex factional politics spanning millennia. We should return inside, Rias suggested, glancing toward the sky where fallen angels had departed. Further discussion requires privacy beyond potential observation. Back in the Occult Research Club room, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically from their earlier technical conversation. Where boundary marker demonstrations had occupied their attention previously, political implications now dominated everyone's thoughts. Tiamat's appearance changes our strategic calculations, Rias began once they had settled into their previous positions. Dragon King's typical. Li maintain neutrality in faction disputes, intervening only when their specific interests are threatened. Her interest seems connected to the draconic essence she detected within me, Issei noted. Something about the Red Dragon Emperor she mentioned. Boosted gear, Akeno explained. One of 13 Longinus-class sacred gears created by biblical God. It contains the soul of Didrag, the Red Dragon Emperor, one of the 2 heavenly dragons imprisoned after nearly destroying the world during ancient times. And I would have manifested this sacred gear if not for becoming the Shadow Monarch's vessel. Apparently so, Rias confirmed. Which raises fascinating metaphysical questions about predetermined destiny versus random circumstance. Sacred gear compatibility typically manifests at puberty, while the Shadow Monarch's essence found you only recently. Nothing random about it, Kuroka interjected, golden eyes narrowed in thought. The Shadow Monarch's essence specifically Chi vessel with compatible spiritual framework, one already prepared to channel extraordinary power. Sacred gear compatibility provided ideal foundation. The theory aligned with Tiamat's suggestion of deliberate orchestration rather than coincidental convergence. If correct, it implied the Shadow Monarch, or whatever remained of its original consciousness, had selected Issei specifically because of his draconic compatibility. That still doesn't explain Tiamat's personal interest, Kiba observed. She mentioned history with Didrag that seemed emotional rather than political. Kuroka's lips curved in knowing amusement. Ancient rumors suggest relationship beyond professional rivalry. Dragons maintain complicated connections spanning millennia. Regardless of historical details, Rias redirected pragmatically. Tiamat's involvement provides potential advantage in navigating other factions. A Dragon King's neutrality offers diplomatic leverage when dealing with biblical representatives, while attracting additional attention from draconic factions previously uninvolved, Akeno countered. Complexity compounds rather than resolves. Throughout this strategic assessment, Issei assessed implications for his increasingly complicated existence. Where his initial concern had focused on controlling shadow abilities and understanding his transformation, political dimensions now expanded exponentially. Multiple powerful factions monitored his development, each with distinct agenda regarding his emerging powers. The fallen angels won't accept diplomatic deflection indefinitely, he noted, returning focus to immediate concerns. Kokubile clearly expected to leave with me today, willing or otherwise. Grigori leadership maintains pragmatic approach to supernatural anomalies, Rias acknowledged. They'll pursue scientific understanding of your abilities through negotiation initially, but escalation remains possible if denied access. Their concern about boundary realm extraction versus soul collection reflects legitimate theological question, Kuroka added, surprising everyone with her insight into biblical faction perspectives. Afterlife management represents re-function for all three biblical powers. Any system potentially circumventing established frameworks threatens fundamental operations. The observation highlighted deeper implications of Issei's abilities beyond immediate political considerations. If shadow extraction operated outside biblical afterlife structures, theological questions arose regarding soul sovereignty and divine authority. Issei's no religious faction could ignore regardless of diplomatic niceties. So what happens now? Issei asked, seeking practical direction amid expanding complications. We continue your training while developing diplomatic responses to faction inquiries, Rias answered with calm authority that belied her relative youth. The boundary markers Kuroka provided offer immediate practical benefit while we establish longer-term strategies. I should continue regular observation of your development, Kuroka added, professional interest only partially masking her evident fascination with Issei's evolving abilities. Documenting the integration process provides valuable data for understanding potential applications and limitations. The suggestion carried practical merit despite Kuroka's question. Abel's status within supernatural hierarchy. Her knowledge of Eastern metaphysical traditions offered perspectives unavailable through biblical faction sources, potentially crucial for understanding ECTS of shadow manipulation that transcended Western conceptual frameworks. As discussion continued regarding practical training schedules and security protocols, Issei found his attention drawn repeatedly to Kaneko, who had maintained uncharacteristic silence even by her reserved standards. The white-haired Nekomata appeared deeply troubled, golden eyes occasionally tracking to her sister before returning to middle-distance contemplation. When conversation reached natural pause, Issei approached her window seat, conscious of both giving her space and showing genuine concern. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Today's been intense for everyone. Kaneko remained silent momentarily before answering in voice barely above whisper. Everything's changing. Too fast. The simple observation captured complex emotional reality. Not just Issei's transformation or supernatural politics, but Kaneko's personal situation with her sister's unexpected reappearance and the complicated history their reunion surfaced. Change isn't always bad, Issei offered carefully. Sometimes it creates opportunities to address things that seemed fixed or unresolvable. Golden eyes studied him with penetrating intensity, seeing beyond surface platitudes to genuine intent beneath. You think Ne-sama and I should reconcile. I think unresolved relationships cause continuing pain, Issei clarified. Whether reconciliation or clear resolution, addressing the past might help both of you move forward. Kaneko fell silent again, small hands clenched in her lap as she processed his suggestion. When she finally spoke, vulnerability replaced her typical stoicism. I don't know how. Too much time. Too many words unsaid. Maybe start with what you just told me, Issei suggested gently. That things are changing too fast. That you don't know how to bridge the gap. Sometimes honesty about confusion creates connection better than certainty ever could. Something shifted in Kaneko's expression. Not immediate resolution but perhaps willingness to consider possibilities previously rejected. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement that nevertheless communicated genuine acknowledgement of his advice. Across the room, Kuroka watched their interaction with unreadable expression, golden eyes tracking between her sister and Issei with calculation tinged by something more complex. Hope, perhaps, our recognition of unexpected potential ally in healing familial wounds. As afternoon transitioned toward evening, practical arrangements concluded with surprising efficiency despite the day's dramatic developments. Kuroka would continue providing yokai perspective on Issei's developing abilities, boundary markers would be incorporated into his training regimen, and diplomatic responses to various faction inquiries would proceed through established channels. When others began departing for respective evening activities, Kuroka approached Issei with characteristic casual grace that barely disguised purposeful intent. Walk with me before returning home, shadow boy. There are aspects of boundary manipulation better demonstrated in natural settings than formal meeting rooms. The request seemed reasonable given their established knowledge exchange, though Issei noted Rias's subtle frown at the suggestion of one-on-one interaction with the notorious stray. Before potential objections could materialize, Kaneko surprised everyone by approaching her sister directly. "I'll come too," she stated quietly but firmly. To observe, the simple declaration carried layered significance beyond its literal meaning. Tentative step toward engagement rather than avoidance, willingness to witness rather than refuse connection. Kuroka's momentary widening of eyes revealed genuine surprise before her customary playful mask reasserted itself. Of course, Shiro, she caught herself, respecting her sister's chosen identity, Kaneko. Your perspective would be valuable. The three departed Togoth as twilight descended over Kuo Academy, heading toward the forested area where Issei had previously practiced shadow extraction. Neither sister spoke initially, silence stretching between them like a physical manifestation of years spent apart. Issei maintained respectful distance, recognizing the potential significance of this unexpected family reunion despite its tentative nature. When they reached the clearing where ancient trees created natural shadows even in fading daylight, Kuroka's demeanor shifted from casual to professionally focused, teacher rather than provocateur. She arranged boundary markers in triangular pattern, channeling yokai energy that activated subtle glowing symbols carved into black jade. Extraction functions optimally when boundary realms align with physical location significance, she explained, gesturing toward the surrounding forest. Areas with historical depth or proximity to death provide strongest connections to shadow impressions. The school was built on former battlefield, Kaneko added unexpectedly, her quiet voice drawing surprised glance from her sister. Bakumatsu era. Many died here. Excellent observation, Kuroka acknowledged, genuine approval warming her tone. Historical layering creates multiple access points to different temporal shadows. The older the death, the more integrated with boundary realms the impression becomes. She directed Issei to stand within the triangle formed by boundary markers. Focus your extraction, but instead of pulling specific shadow, allow your awareness to expand through available impressions. Like browsing library rather than selecting single book. The instruction differed from previous extraction techniques, which had focused on manifesting individual shadows based on purpose or proximity. Following Kuroka's guidance, Issei extended his awareness outward while maintaining connection to boundary markers stabilizing influence. The sensation proved remarkable, where previous extractions felt like reaching through resistance to grasp single entity. This expansion created panoramic awareness of countless shadow impressions layered throughout the area's history. Warriors from different eras, farmers who had worked the land before urbanization, animals that had lived and died across centuries, all existed simultaneously in boundary realm accessible through his developing perception. I can sense them all. Issei breathed, eyes closed as he navigated this new awareness. Hundreds of impressions, distinct but connected. Now focus on specific historical period, Kuroka instructed. The markers will stabilize temporal alignment while you extract. Issei concentrated on impressions from the Bakumatsu era Kaneko had mentioned. His awareness crystallized around clues. Chair of samurai who had fallen during conflict near this location. With careful focus, he extracted not single shadow but coordinated unit, 5 warriors manifesting simultaneously with minimal addition. AL energy expenditure compared to individual extraction. Shadow extraction successful, the samurai announced in unified voice, kneeling in perfect formation. This unit served Daimyo Matsudera during final conflicts of Tokugawa Shogunate. We await commands, Shadow Monarch. Kaneko's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of her surprise at the multiple simultaneous extraction performed with apparent ease. Kuroka nodded approvingly, circling the manifested unit with professional assessment. Boundary marker stabilization increases extraction efficiency approximately 70%, she noted. Multiple simultaneous manifestations should theoretically allow proportional expansion of your shadow army with reduced energy consumption. Not just efficiency, Issei observed as he directed the samurai through basic movements to test responsiveness. The extraction feels cleaner, more precise. The shadows maintain clearer connection to their original identities. Boundary stabilis. Issei reduces metaphysical static between realms, Kuroka explained. Without markers, extraction pulls shadow through dimensional interference that degrades information transfer. With proper stabilization, more complete impressions manifest. The practical demonstration continued as daylight faded completely, Issei experimenting with different extraction techniques while Kuroka provided technica. Guidance based on yokai tradition principles. Throughout these exercises, Kaneko observed silently, her golden eyes tracking between her sister's instructions and Issei's implementations with thoughtful assessment. When practical experimentation reached natural conclusion, Kuroka collected the boundary markers while Issei dismissed the shadow unit. The three stood in forest clearing illuminated, now only by moonlight filtering through ancient branches, two Nekomata sisters with centuries of complicated history between them, and the evolving vessel of the Shadow Monarch who had somehow become catalyst for their tentative reconnection. The integration accelerates, Kuroka observed, studying Issei's aura with professional interest. Your control develops remarkably quickly for human vessel. Not entirely human anymore, Kaneko corrected quietly. The balance shifts daily. The observation carried no judgment, merely accurate assessment from her unique sensory perception. Where human observers might still see ordinary teenager with unusual abilities, Kaneko's Nekomata heritage allowed her to detect the fundamental transformation occurring within Issei's essence. Yet his consciousness remains distinctly human despite advancing integration, Kuroka noted with genuine curiosity. Previous vessels typically experienced personality dissolution proportional to power manifestation. Your retention of core identity while accessing increasing abilities represents unprecedented development pattern. Maybe because I'm not fighting the transformation, Issei suggested, remembering his earlier decision to work with rather than against the Shadow Monarch's essence. Resistance creates conflict, acceptance allows harmonious integration. Similar to advanced senjutsu principles, Kuroka acknowledged, glancing briefly toward her sister. Alignment rather than opposition determines successful energy channeling. The conversation paused as Kaneko visibly struggled with internal conflict. Years of conditioning against her yokai heritage warring with evident intellectual interest in concepts being discussed. Finally, something resolved in her expression as she asked her first direct question to her sister in years. Is control really possible? The simple inquiry carried layers of meaning beyond immediate context, not just about senjutsu techniques but about Kuroka's own experiences. About fear of corruption that had shaped Kaneko's suppression of her heritage. Kuroka's customary playfulness faded completely, replaced by earnest sincerity rarely displayed. Yes, with proper training and emotional anchoring. What happened with our former master resulted from specific circumstances, overwhelming rage without balancing influence. Properly developed techniques include protective frameworks against negative energy corruption. The explanation offered neither excuse for past actions nor dismissal of legitimate concerns, simply factual context previously absent from Oniko's understanding of events that had shaped her life. Could you? Kaneko hesitated, vulnerability momentarily visible beneath her stoic exterior. Could you teach control without corruption? The question hung in moonlit clearing, tentative olive branch extended across years of separation and misunderstanding. Kuroka's expression shifted through complex emotions before settling into EFUL neutrality that failed to completely mask her hope. If you wish to learn, I would teach, she answered simply. When you're ready, no pressure, no expectations. The exchange represented neither complete reconciliation nor absolution for past actions, merely first small step toward potential healing of wounds that had festered through years of silence. Both sisters maintained cautious distance. Trust destroyed too thoroughly for immediate restoration, yet possibility now existed where none had seemed possible before. As they walked back toward academy grounds where Rias waited to escort Kaneko home, Issei reflected on unexpected developments beyond his shadow abilities. His transformation had somehow catalyzed connections between previously isolated individuals, Devil Heiress and Stray Nekomata finding common purpose. Separated sisters taking tentative steps toward communication, Ancient Dragon expressing interest in unprecedented power synthesis. The Shadow Monarch historic all-why represented isolation, solitary ruler commanding armies of the dead from boundary between worlds. Yet Issei's integration seemed to manifest differently, creating connections rather than separation. Building bridges across traditional faction boundaries instead of maintaining isolated domain. "You're unusually quiet, Shadow Boy," Kuroka observed as they approached the academy building illuminated against night sky. "Processing new extraction techniques. Thinking about unexpected consequences," Issei replied honestly. "My transformation affects more than just my abilities, it's changing rel. Asian ships and politics I barely understand. The Shadow Monarch's awakening represents fundamental shift in supernatural equilibrium," Kuroka acknowledged. "Your specific approach determines whether that shift leads toward integration or isolation, cooperation or conflict." "I never wanted to become political focal point," Issei noted with wry resignation. "I just wanted to understand what was happening to me." "Power never exists in vacuum," Kuroka replied, wisdom beyond her apparent age momentarily visible beneath playful exterior. "Particularly power that transcends established faction boundaries. Your choices extend beyond personal development to potential restructuring of supernatural relationships that have remained relatively fixed for millennia." The assessment highlighted responsibility accompanying Issei's developing abilities, implications extending far beyond personal transformation to potentially reshape interactions between supernatural factions that had maintained uneasy coexistence since biblical era. As they reached the academy entrance where Rias waited with carefully neutral expression, Kuroka surprised both Issei and her sister by addressing Kaneko directly with uncharacteristic formality. "Thank you for observing today's training," she said, maintaining respectful distance. "Your perspective would be welcome at future sessions, should you choose to attend." Kaneko remained silent momentarily before nodding once, minimal acknowledgement that nevertheless represented significant change from previous complete avoidance. Without further comment, she moved to stand beside Rias, clearly indicating readiness to depart. "I'll see you tomorrow for regular training," Rias reminded Issei, professional tone barely masking her curiosity about the forest excursion's outcomes. "We should incorporate these boundary techniques into our established regimen." After they departed via transportation circle, Kuroka turned to Issei with calculating assessment. That seemed to measure various conversational approaches before selecting direct honesty, unusual choice for someone typically operating behind layers of playful misdirection. "Thank you," she said simply, "for creating opportunity where none existed previously." "I didn't do anything special," Issei demurred, genuinely confused by her gratitude. "You treated Sharon as person capable of making her own decisions rather than victim requiring protection from Big Bad Sister," Kuroka corrected, rare genuine emotion coloring her voice. After years of devils reinforcing her fear and isolation, her simple suggestion that communication might prove beneficial represented significant intervention. The explanation highlighted faction politics Issei hadn't fully appreciated, how devils might have encouraged Kaneko's rejection of her yokai heritage and estrangement from her sister for both practical and political reasons. She deserves chance to form her own opinions based on complete information. Issei replied with straightforward conviction. "Whatever happened in your past, she's old enough now to evaluate circumstances herself instead of accepting others' interpretations." Something complex flickered across Kuroka's features, appreciation tinged with emerging respect beyond her initial curiosity about his developing abilities. "You're either remarkably insightful for human teenage, or the Shadow Monarch's wisdom influences your perspective more than you realize." "Maybe both," Issei acknowledged with self-deprecating smile. "I'm still figuring out where Issei Hyodo ends and the Shadow Monarch begins. That boundary may eventually become meaningless distinction," Kuroka observed without judgment. "Complete integration typically results in unified consciousness rather than maintained separation." The assessment aligned with Issei's evolving understanding of his transformation, not possession by external entity but gradual synthesis creating something new from combined essences. The original Shadow Monarch's consciousness provided knowledge and power framework, Issei's human perspective contributed emotional understanding and ethical framework. Together, they were becoming entity neither could have been independently. As Kuroka prepared to depart, she hesitated momentarily, studying Issei with uncharacteristic seriousness. "The factions converging around you will each attempt to influence your development according to their interests. Devils, fallen angels, dragons, all see the Shadow Monarch as potential asset or threat to established power structures. And yokai? Issei asked. What do you want from my transformation? Golden eyes regarded him with enigmatic calculation before she answered with surprising candor. Balance restoration. The element. All monarchs originally maintained equilibrium between fundamental forces, darkness and light, fire and water, earth and air. Their disappearance created vacuum biblical factions filled through different organizational principles. You think my emergence could restore previous balance? I think possibility exists for new framework incorporating beneficial aspects of both systems, Kuroka clarified. Neither complete return to monarch-dominated era nor continuation of biblical faction monopoly, but synthesis acknowledging validity in diverse supernatural traditions. The vision suggested remarkably progressive perspective from someone typically characterized as self-interested criminal, recognition of potential beyond personal advantage or factional politics to fundamental restructuring had might benefit supernatural world collectively. Ambitious vision for stray Nekomata typically concerned with immediate survival, Issei observed, not unkindly. Kuroka's lips curved in knowing smile. Perhaps I contain multitudes beyond devil classification systems, Shadow Boy. Just as you embody more than singular monarch identity. With that cryptic statement, she stepped backward into shadow cast by Academy building. Space folding around her in that distinctive yokai transportation technique until nothing remained but lingering trace of her supernatural signature. Alone in moonlit Academy grounds, Issei contemplated the day's dramatic developments, Dragon King appearance, Fallen Angel diplomatic confrontation, Nekomata sisters' tentative reconnection, and expanded understanding of his own accelerating transformation. Where his journey had initially seemed personal struggle to control unexpected abilities, broader implications now emerged with increasing clarity. The Shadow Monarch's awakening represented potential catalyst for supernatural world realignment, opportunity to bridge traditional faction boundaries through entity that transcended established classification systems. Whether that potential manifested as constructive synthesis or destructive disruption depended largely on choices made during integration process still underway. As Issei walked home through nighttime Kuo, shadows lengthened around him, not threatening but protective, responding to his contemplative mood with gentle undulations that occasionally formed crown-like shape before dissolving back into ordinary darkness. The symbolic manifestation occurred with increasing frequency during significant realizations, as if the original Shadow Monarch's consciousness acknowledged important insights in their shared developmental journey. Tomorrow would bring further training, faction negotiations, and continuing transformation. But tonight had demonstrated possibility beyond power accumulation, or political maneuvering, potential for healing relationships previously thought irreparable and bridging divides maintained through centuries of supernatural segregation. The Shadow Monarch was awakening, but not as isolated ruler commanding armies from boundary between worlds. Instead, it emerged as connector between traditionally separated domains, darkness that defined light rather than negated it. Shadow that provided contrast rather than obscuration. Something new was forming through Issei's transformation, not merely resurrection of ancient power but evolution of its fundamental nature. Her human perspective and connections impossible in previous incarnations. Whether supernatural factions would recognize this distinction remained uncertain, but the potential for unprecedented integration had unmistakably emerged through today's convergence of traditionally separated entities. Dragons, devils, yokai, and fallen angels, all now orbited the awakening Shadow Monarch, drawn by power, but perhaps destined to discover connection transcending traditional boundaries. The factions converged, and through their convergence, possibility arose for something beyond historical precedent or factional prediction. Something altogether new. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.